Oh, I should have asked you. Hello. Hello, everyone. Yes, the APG crew is here. Well, some of us. And we have a guest APG crew member. That's Amar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. Yeah.
Oh, wait. Hang on. Look, see, I made another rookie mistake. You know the thing I told you not to do? I did myself.
Well, there was a couple things
There we
you
go.
told me not to do.
Yeah.
Don't touch anything.
Oh, no, he loves it when you touch his stuff.
That is true.
Particularly when he's not looking and you twiddle something and then you don't tell him what it was.
No, I do not like that. Do not do that.
We play that game on the flight deck sometimes. You know, we turn something off and then the other guy has to look around and try and work out what it was.
Hello, everybody on the live feed. I do apologize for us, our late start again. Of course, I never said exactly when we were going to start, so can't get me there.
He told me 2 hours ago.
I told you.
I've been sitting there all afternoon picking my nose.
But I drove all the way down here to the Acme Training Center, where Amar is attending his recurrent training, and that means I had to drive through downtown, and traffic was not very pleasant today with the rain that we're having here. Let's see, what was I going to do? I was going to take these two items and drag them to this window to make it a little bit easier for me, because God knows I need to make it as easy as possible. Right, Nick? He's still there?
Yeah.
Oh, he's got his clapper.
I'm ready. I'm ready, able, and willing.
Okay, good.
Bet you haven't got your clapper.
I do not. I left it at home. Sorry, Nev. Nev. Where am I? Oh, I'm hearing it from yours, I think. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, I got that. Got that. Let me go to my intro page. We should be starting shortly.
All days are the same to me, Micah. They're starting to blend one into another. Although I'm actually going on a trip tomorrow, so that'll be fun. Except I'm going to Lagos, so it won't be fun.
How would I introduce you? Former
corporate pilot,
Falcon 900
sure.
Corporate pilot,
sure,
and now first officer for a Canadian cargo carrier.
Sounds good.
Okay.
I'm going to take notes, put that on my resume.
Loving father, dutiful father, loving father, dutiful husband.
Well, my wife's not
loving
listening
father,
to the show.
wonderful husband.
Well, you know,
she's not listening to the show. We can say anything.
Remember, 50% is what we strive for.
You're right. Right.
All right. And let's see. I guess I'll be playing this for you.
This is the one we have to put a bowl of fruit in your head.
Oh, yeah.
Why does that soundtrack remind me of Dana?
I don't know.
We used to play it when he came along before he got his own intro.
Oh, really? Is that what we were playing for a while?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm drinking iced coffee. Isn't that nice?
Okay.
Thank you, Liz. Yes, I'm not coughing and sounding gravelly, which is an absolute pleasure. My ear's still a little bit gunky, but hopefully tomorrow, we'll come home nice and high, and they'll either blow up or clear.
Yeah, it just seems like everybody I know, Nick, got sick over that period of time.
Oh, yeah. I mean, trouble is, perhaps not quite so bad for you if you're flying cargo, but mixing it with hundreds upon hundreds of passengers is never good for your health.
Sure.
I think our crews have been going down like flies.
Right.
Mind you, go to quite so exotic places as you. I guess there must be some weird and wonderful diseases you can pick up around the world doing what you do.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm trying with the new job, which works out pretty good. I'm pretty junior. It keeps me relatively in the same time zone, so it's a win-win.
Oh, okay. That sounds good.
I'm enjoying that. Doing the local stuff.
So what are your sort of regular routes, if there is such a thing?
Back and forth across Canada, a couple destinations in the US. I find myself in Cincinnati quite often when we do some of the DHL flying. Yeah, but it is nice flying a 5-7, 15-20 minute legs. Having an airplane empty like that, it flies like a Learjet. So I'm really enjoying it.
What does it fly like with an 8x2 foot, a bit of the wing missing? You see that picture, have you?
What are you referring?
There's a picture of a 7.5 going around, and it's blown a panel off the inboard upper surface of the starboard wing.
Right. Okay.
And this panel is about 8x2 feet, and it's completely missing. And all you can see underneath are what looks like the top of the undercarriage oleos and various hydraulic pipes, something leaking like the devil. I mean, it looks absolutely appalling. I mean, it's a huge chunk of the upper surface.
You don't need that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean,
it's flying, isn't it? Come on.
We're not even allowed to get airborne with a little bit of frost on the upper surface.
Right, yeah.
And there's this bloke trolling around with this huge chunk of wing.
It helps cools the flaps down, right? So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Better airflow.
Okay, folks in the chat room, how are our levels? I want to make sure that we're all somewhat similar. And we'll wait for about 25 seconds before we get a response. I think we have our sound man in there, don't we? Mr. Neville Bounce.
Yes. He's talking about picking up diseases in Luton.
That used to be a common stop for me. Luton.
London Luton. Where is that in relation to the?
It's nowhere near London. That's all I can tell you.
Oh,
it's the opposite side of London to me, really. It's like the northeast, but it's quite a way out of London.
Yeah. Well, yeah. We didn't even lay over in Luton. We'd land there and park the jet, and
go somewhere nice.
Go somewhere nice. Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah,
did we get a response yet on the levels? Are okay.
Thank you, Brian. It's nice to be feeling a bit better. That's for sure.
Sounded good. Okay, good. Thank you, Graham. Main man, Micah. Nick, you sound much better. Oh, that's what you just responded to. Never mind.
Yep.
I have to quietly listen to at work, so no chat for me. Okay, Dan. And if we say something that's even somewhat humorous, try to stifle the laughing. Oh, okay. I'll avoid at all costs, Dev. Okay, I'm going to stop looking at that. And let's do a sound check on the...
Wow, there's a lot going on over here.
Yep.
I feel like first day of sim.
Flight 209, are you clear for takeoff?
Increasing my volume.
What's that?
Increasing my volume would help.
Your volume?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mariana.
Okay, now talk.
Hello? Is that better, Mariana?
He's soft spoken.
Yes, I noticed that you would be no good on my flight deck since I'm half deaf.
You'd have to do sign language.
Absolutely. Yes.
Or do what I do a lot. Yep. And just shake your head.
Right. Yeah.
Agree with whatever whatever they're saying.
Because if it was important, they'll shout the next time.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Nick, flaps 2. Okay.
I love this
now
place
I get
too.
you.
Yeah.
I thought you were just giving me a V sign. Yeah.
Oh, now Amar is too hot volume-wise.
Sorry.
Well, Amar, you hear that a lot, I'm sure.
Yeah.
You're just too hot.
Yeah.
Let's see. Plus,
thanks, Liz.
50.
I'll try my best not to shame Canadians today.
low standards. So
Yeah.
just kidding.
Just ask San Francisco.
Well, you're kind of out of the doghouse. Another country.
Yeah, thank you.
Came in there.
Exactly. Yeah, I just saw that. I refreshed and so happy to see that. No.
Okay, so let me see. Bump his volume down a little bit. Okay, now, how's the gym routine going? It's going, not great. Haven't been going as often as I should. In fact, I canceled my my physical torture session this morning so that I could do the show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but you had plenty of time to do the show, as it turns out.
Yeah, now I do. But see, we were going to try to do something a little bit earlier so that Steph could join us, but just didn't work out. So I'll reschedule. Hopefully I'll be able to get something in tomorrow.
Well, the gym downstairs seemed pretty nice. I
could go to my gym today. I'll go to my gym today sometime to get some cardio and that kind of thing. But I'm kind of afraid to go to the last personal trainer that I had. Her name is Kiera.
Okay.
And she made me do things that made me hurt for 4 or 5 days. And it was brutal.
Yeah.
She tried to kill me. So I was not at all reluctant to cancel my session with her this morning.
Sometimes I find it just so much easier to diet.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Let me make sure. I don't think anybody got a push notification, did they? Because I sent one out, but I didn't get one. There was some kind of an error message that I got. Oh well.
I didn't spot one, but then again, I haven't been staring.
You haven't been getting them for a long time, right?
No, I haven't.
I don't know what's going on with that. It's refreshing number of push notification. It's like 400,000 that I have remaining. So I don't think there's any way that I've gone through that many. Pretty sure.
Wouldn't have thought so. Oh,
I have 491,791 push notifications left.
Micah got the push, but he's an Android, isn't he?
Yes. No, Micah has an iPhone.
Does he? Okay, right.
Yeah. You got the actual push notification, not the tweet, Micah?
Micah got the push, he said.
Okay.
Yeah, it seems like
Graham did too. Okay.
Yeah,
Liz didn't.
All right, I didn't either. Yeah, Micah's iOS and he got one. Huh. All right. It's a mystery to me. Life is a mystery. Oh, I still have some things I just remembered. We that little clip that we just recorded. We got to get in to the to this so everybody can hear it.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I thought I was ready to go here, but I'm not quite. Why can't I find that folder? You converse amongst yourselves. There we go. Listen to Captain Nick whistling.
Tunelessly.
Why is it not in there? Podcast bumpers.
Haven't heard Crazy Down Under's.
I don't think they're recording until perhaps maybe today.
Oh, all right. Okay.
They had to shift the recording because of their schedules. Anyway, that was last thing that I saw from them.
Fair enough.
I was thinking about it'd be kind of fun to play that what you did, Nick, on our show, but I don't want to do that before they do their show.
Go on with you. It's only their last show. They won't mind.
Yeah, it's not that significant.
I actually changed the wording over slightly because it actually rhymed a slightly better, different way. So I've actually got a re-recording, which you've got the right one, which I gave to you.
Okay.
Because the one I originally put in there I wasn't happy with, so I re-recorded it.
Well, you just have to listen to the last PCDU podcast, where you'll hear the wonderful creative work from the wonderful creative Captain Nick Anderson.
Ha ha ha. And Neville has asked a question. You could
Oh,
always
wait,
send some feedback in, Nev. And the answer is no. We have occasionally taken the 330 in the Lagos, but generally we don't. The only reason is because we're trying to keep the 340 on the shorter routes because of its higher fuel burn. It's less of a penalty on a shorter route. And the Lagos are traditionally jam-packed. We've got a larger cargo hold in the 340 than a bloody 747-400. Despite the fact everyone seems to think that's a big airplane, it's not. It's got a little weeny little cargo hold. Teeny weeny. So because the Nigerian gentlemen and ladies like to carry an awful lot of luggage with them, purchases, etc., they make out of the country, we try and keep the 340 on it because
wow.
we can cope with all their excess baggage.
Love it.
Excess baggage. I have a lot of that.
Oh,
They do, Liz. They do.
Okay. I think I have most everything.
Tell me when you want to sync.
Okay. You have your recorder going?
Yep.
No, I
It's
don't.
been
Hang
going
on.
for like 7-8 minutes now.
Okay, hang on. Let me get to the window with my. Ooh, levels are kind of high there. Why? Okay. Let me hit the record button. Boom. Okay. Ready?
Yep.
3, 2, 1. See the latency?
Yeah.
It's
I was
funny when-
actually a bit later than you. Anyway, I think I was a bit behind you for some
Okay.
reason.
Let's do it again.
Yeah.
3, 2, 1. Clap. That was closer.
That seemed to work fine for me.
When we do it with everybody else, it's like clack, 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 clack.
I must admit, there doesn't seem to be an awful lot of latency. It's working very well today.
Yeah.
It must be Amar's bright and shiny Wi-Fi link.
It must be. All
thanks
right.
to Marriott residents in.
Let's see. Hang on here. I need to adjust the USB trim.
Yeah, I asked all the other crew that are here on recurrent to not use the Wi-Fi for a couple hours.
Yeah, how's that going to work?
Got something important going on, guys.
How many from your company are here?
Oh, I keep running into guys. I'm
A lot.
guessing. Yeah,
Oh.
maybe 10 of us, maybe more.
Wow.
I think we're here
Must
for
be
2
nice
weeks.
in the bar.
You're here for how long?
No. I mean, I think the guys are going to be here.
Oh, you're not going to be
yeah.
here for 2
No,
weeks.
I'm not going to be here for 2 weeks.
Well, he might be.
Might be. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, he's not supposed to be there that long.
I'm supposed to be studying now, but
Uh-oh. Now he gives me the guilt.
right. Yeah. No, I think our company had at least 2 weeks. I would imagine, maybe even more.
And I'm sure they're getting a fantastic deal
Yeah.
from my company.
Sure. Yeah.
The place that used to be the devil for us was Berlin. We used to go there for the Lufthansa sims, simulator, use their buildings. And we did like one a day, and then the rest of the day was ours. And there was always about 5 or 6 crews going through. And we all stayed in the same hotel, and there was the same bar, the Ranky Bar number 2, that was just over the road. And the marathon drinking sessions that went on in there.
What?
were
Pilots drink?
just horrendous. I'm not.
We're going to have to do the clap again. Sorry. For some reason, all the channels except yours was being recorded. So.
Oh, I see. Picking on me again.
Yeah. Sorry.
I'm ready.
Hang on. Let me get it going again.
You want me to restart the recording on my side?
Yeah, why don't you do that? Because I don't have all that extra stuff there.
Yep. Okay. Hang on a minute.
I'm glad I
I'm
looked
ready.
at that because, yeah, that would have been not good.
I'm ready.
Okay. 3, 2, 1, clap. Okay.
Pretty
Good.
damn good.
There we go.
Hi, Glenn.
And moving it to this. And okay. Recording on YouTube, recording on my laptop. I don't have any backup going, so fingers crossed.
Love the buildup.
Yep.
Things are happening.
Things are happening. And I'll probably stumble on your introduction, but whatever.
I'm pretending to be busy here, but I'm staring at a blank screen.
Yes, he hasn't even turned his laptop on. He's just acting like this is what he does in the airplane too, I think.
Right. Yeah.
Just acts like he is doing something.
That's right. Yeah.
What are you doing over there, Amar? I'm busy.
Yep.
Hang on, I'll be right with you. Okay. I just realized I'm really hungry. My stomach is about to growl, I think. Okay, here we go. Yep. Airline Pilot Guy, episode 306.
Flight 209, you are clear for takeoff.
Hello, you're listening to the Airline Pilot Guy Show, a view from our side of the cockpit door. I'm Captain Jeff, your host, broadcasting live from Studio 1221 in the Residence Inn Recording Studios in Hapeville, Georgia. In this episode, shoot. You're looking at my script? That was one more thing I forgot to do.
More news.
Did you say Hateville?
Hateville.
Hateville. I think it's Hateville.
No, Hateville is where you live. Because you hate everything. Hate me.
Just Grumpyville.
I wish I could
Grumpy.
the wow.
Yeah, there's a reason why. See, I could have put the soundboard over here between the two of us.
I got it.
Yeah.
But you were worried that Amar was going to press something. He does that to me too. He hides the soundboard so I can't get at it.
I know, and it's colorful and it's just tempting.
I know.
Okay.
Yeah, the only thing I have access to is to mute myself.
And feel free to use that if you'd like.
Sure.
No, just kidding. No, I'm not kidding. Because you may want to mute yourself, at times.
Yeah.
Let's see. So how am I going to say this?
Where is Dana?
You usually take a breath in.
Hello,
And then-
APG
Oops.
crew. Derek here from the Wild.
Derek, hey, Derek, hush.
Shut up, Derek.
It's not time yet. Damn it. Derek always does that.
Derek, we've got Halal in the back.
Hillel is somewhere, I think.
Where is he?
He's over.
APG listener,
Not yet.
please join us on our
He's around the
Slack
corner
team.
in the bathroom.
On Slack,
Perfect.
We share news and
Keep him
ideas.
Okay, Hillel. Gosh. Such a publicity hog. Okay, Jet Airways pilots
Uh-oh.
fired. And
What, out of a cannon?
yes. What would you say? Terminated?
Dismissed.
Dismissed.
With
Right.
with extreme prejudice.
To Jet Airways pilots dismissed. You're dismissed. May I come back? No, you may not come back. You are permanently dismissed with prejudice. For fighting and on the weather, uninhabited, and not again. Another post call. Okay, what do you think? Try this again?
Yep.
All right. Airline Pilot Guy, episode 306. Oops, I was about to hit the karaoke button. Airline Pilot Guy, episode 306.
Flight 209, you are clear for takeoff.
Hello, you're You're listening to the Airline Pilot Guy Show, the view from our side of the cockpit door. I'm Captain Jeff, your host, broadcasting live from Studio 1221 in the Residence Inn Recording Studios in Hapeville, Georgia. In today's episode, 2 Jet Airways pilots dismissed for fighting in the cockpit. Not again. Another close call at San Francisco International. More news, your feedback, and the latest Plain Tales installment, RAF Form 414. So get all settled in. Tray tables and seatbacks in their upright and locked positions. Electronic devices powered on. Flight 306 is ready for pushback. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Airline Pilot Guy Show. It's an aviation podcast where we're making aviation podcasting great again. And joining me today from across the pond, we have from his sprawling country estate southwest of London, a professional photographer, former RAF, RAAF fighter pilot, current captain for an international airline based in London, Captain Nick Anderson.
Hi, Jeff. Lovely to be on the show again. Wow, after a couple of full starts, or perhaps more, we're eventually doing it. Isn't this marvelous? Can't wait.
Yes, well, we'll not talk about all those technical difficulties. We probably will. But also joining us, let me first introduce our guest host today, our guest crew member. And he hails from Scandinavia. No, that's not right. Canada, somewhere in Canada. Canada. We have former Falcon 900 corporate pilot and now first officer for a Canadian cargo carrier. He's a loving father, a dedicated husband, Amar.
Hello, everybody. It's wonderful to be here. Thanks for having me, Captain Jeff. This is exciting.
Good. I'm excited too. So you might wonder, well, why is Amar with Captain Jeff sitting in a hotel room near the Atlanta International Airport? Well, I'm trying to figure that out myself. No,
that may be a question we shouldn't ask on the show.
So I got a text from Amar, and he goes, "Hey, are you in town? Like the next few days?" And I said, "Yeah, I just got back from a trip." And he said, "Well, I kind of a short notice thing, but I got called and told that I need to go to recurrent training, and his company is renting or hiring the simulators at Acme Training Center, Acme Global Training Center." And so he said, "I'm going to be here for a couple days." And I said, "Hey, would you be interested in being part of the APG crew on this week's episode?" And he said he'd love it.
He twisted my arm.
I did. I made him do it.
Made me do it.
I said, "Okay, I'll buy lunch if you join me on the podcast."
Yeah.
So here we are. Yeah, we're staying at the residence, or he is staying here very close to the training center. And so I'm thinking to myself, it seems like you have not been with this cargo carrier very long. And how can it be that you're already in recurrent training? Is that because you're just not doing very well?
Right. Yeah. So in Canada, the 7.5 and the 767 is actually 2 separate type ratings. So I came down in the summer, that was in August, to do my initial type rating in Miami on the 7.6, and got back to Canada, and we do a little in-house ground school, and that's the convergent course for the 7.5, and they endorse it on your license. So the way our company operates is your first recurrent has to be what we call in Canada a PPC, a pilot proficiency check on the other type. So because I did my initial on the 7.6, now I'm down here to do my recurrent on the 7.5. I was scheduled to come down for recurrent in about a month from now. And for us Canadians to use the American training facilities, we have to submit TSA security clearance. And it can be a lengthy process. Mine took maybe a little over 24 hours to come back. And, I thought I'd do it early and, sit on my hands and wait for a recurrent. Company called me up. I think it was on Monday evening, and they said, "Well, you're the only one that has his TSA clearance, and one of the pilots that was down for recurrent injured his thumb, and apparently you need your thumb in the simulator. So, so here I am. I flew down with an express carrier that flies the Canadian flag, and down in Atlanta on Wednesday, and did a bit of reading. Text Captain Jeff, and didn't think it was going to happen, but here I am. I'm glad I'm here.
Yeah, and it's Friday now. What day is it? The 12th of January, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So great. I'm glad that we had recording issues in Flint 2 days ago, Wednesday, when you were flying down from Canada.
Yep.
Because then we wouldn't have had this opportunity to get together and have you on the show with us.
It was a great show. I loved it.
Well, okay. So that show that he is referring to, the video of it is on the our YouTube channel. I was having major issues with the bandwidth at the Holiday Inn in Flint, Michigan, where this little card in my room on my desk says that they have high-speed wireless internet. Well, they have wireless internet, but I don't know why they want to call it high speed, because it was not high speed. And in fact, not only was it very slow bandwidth, but it kept dropping out, and we were trying to Captain Nick and Dr. Steph were there trying to understand what I was saying, which is kind of a difficult thing for them anyway, but in this case it was compounded by the poor bandwidth, and every third word I think was coming through. So we finally just said, forget it, we're gonna give up. We're going to do this again within the next few days.
Sorry, everyone, but it worked out great for me. So
yeah, and for us as well.
Yeah.
So,
but not for poor Steph. Having said that, she's
that's a shame.
About to start some fun, isn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't feel really sorry for Steph. I feel sorry for the community that they don't get to hear from Dr. Steph. But trust me, she's having a great time. She's down in Miami, about to board a cruise ship.
Wow.
Right now.
She was just texting me that she was off to buy some wine to take Sneak on board, and she showed me a picture of the liquor store she'd just gone to, and it's closed. So I don't know quite how she's gonna cope with that. Poor love.
She's gonna have to spend all the big bucks on the cruise ship then.
Yeah, afraid so.
Yeah, so we're gonna miss Steph. Steph, if you're listening, we hope that you have a great cruise. And I'm sure you'll have a great time, and you'll tell us about it on the next episode, hopefully.
Oh, give us something to talk about.
Speaking of cruise ships, there is another APG crew member on a cruise. I think he's still on the cruise now. Dana is not able to join us this week because of the fun and frivolity of his cruise. And apparently, what did he tell us last time? That he had purchased the $43 per day unlimited alcohol pass, or whatever they call it. So I hope that he hasn't fallen overboard and that he's still okay.
Yes. Having said that, I think he was saying that, a cocktail costs like $11 if you buy it. So he's only got to down 4 cocktails and he's already in profit. So
I'm sure he's going to stop right there at 4 per day.
I'm sure.
Per hour.
Not.
Anyway, so we miss you too, Dana, if you happen to be listening to this, either live or after the fact. But Captain Nick, how it sounds like you're feeling a little bit better.
Oh, I certainly, I certainly haven't had any coughs or sneezes, just a little bit of a throat, and perhaps a sinus is not 100%, but certainly fit enough to go flying. I was just looking back at my diary. I last flew to the landing on the 16th of December. And since then, I have not done a thing. So now at the 12th of January, that's quite a while. So I was out of currency for my line check. So it means I have to do a pre-line check called an AOC, and they determine if I'm fit to do my line check, fit and capable. And I'm doing that tomorrow. So I'm off to lovely Lagos tomorrow. And then I'm off for quite a few days because I'm heading up to Cosford to lecture to the Royal Aeronautical Society, which I'm really looking forward to. And I think that both Pip and Nev may be up there. There's a chance that someone else might be joining us. I haven't heard confirmation about that yet, but it might have a few APGs up there for moral support. Then we're heading off. Yeah, that's much more likely. We're heading off the next day down to London to book into the Putney Bridge Hotel and have a nice meal that night. And I think you're flying in on that. That'll be Friday the 19th. You're getting in quite early that day, I think, aren't you, Jeff?
Well, that's the plan. Still. Oh,
Sorry, muted you by.
oh, look at that. Can you believe this? Amar is sitting there in front of the mixer control panel and he muted me.
Sorry about that.
How rude.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it.
Yeah.
Get out of here. Oh, wait a minute. I'm going to get out of here.
He's only a first so give him a break.
That's right. Well, I'm seated on the left side, Captain Nick, if you didn't.
Yeah, exactly right. That's true. He's using the wrong hand to
Yeah, that's
For a minute there, I actually thought I was having a stroke. I'm thinking, I feel like I'm trying to make words, but I'm not hearing any of them. Wow.
I love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
What was I saying? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So the plan is
Yeah.
to fly out on Thursday evening and then getting in early Friday morning. So
I'll be getting into London just after you land. So, well, hopefully we'll meet up around Putney, around lunchtime, and then we're going to have a nice afternoon yakking probably, and then go out for a nice evening meal, have a few beverages, and the next day is PT UK 200. So that's going to be the bee's knees. Looking forward to that.
that is that's going to be very exciting. Can't wait. And the only downside is that I think that Nev will be there. That
Yeah.
let that ruin everything.
Well, I'm pretty sure Piff will be there as well. So,
Oh, you're kidding me? He's going to be there
right.
too.
Well, I'm thinking he might be.
You know what? Let me look at the seat availability on these flights. I'm thinking that they might be filling up really fast. May not be able to make it.
Yeah. So anyway, that's my month ahead. Just this one trip to do, and then basically off to the end of the month. Got a little a boost today to my morale because I hadn't heard anything from the company about my move to greater part-time. So I have a little bit more time between trips, and they've just confirmed that not next month, but the month after, I'll be down to 75% of a full roster, which will give me a couple of extra days, which I'm looking forward to. Having said that, I haven't done much flying in December or January, so I've pretty much on that kind of a roster at the moment anyway. So yeah, I'm saying, well, life's pretty peachy at the moment.
Peachy. That's wonderful.
Mm.
I'm sure that you're going to be up to speed very quickly. How hard is it to remember which button to push, right?
Yeah, there's only two. I mean, it's a 50-50 chance. Isn't it?
Of course, we're kidding. There are more than two. I think there are about 5 or 6. But
yeah, at least.
Well,
yeah, but the other three we're not supposed to push. So
oh, you have to remember not to push those.
yeah, exactly right.
All right. Well, glad to see that you're feeling better and you'll be fully qualified again. Let's see. For me, was on a Tuesday through Thursday, and I mentioned that we were trying to record the show on Wednesday in Flint, Michigan. Now, so
how was the weather?
Well, the weather, Amar. Funny you should ask. So we're flying up from Atlanta on Wednesday, and they're showing some, mid level ceilings like 600 over, but the terminal forecast was forecasting for ceilings to drop down to about 300. And I'm thinking, no problem. They have ILS approaches for runway 9 and runway 27, and then they have a 18 and 36 runway as well. But they have non-precision approaches. So we're heading up there and we're looking at the weather, and it's kind of holding at 600 feet. And they're advertising. I'm having a discussion with the dispatcher, and I said, "Do you have any idea what runways they're using up there?" They don't have a digital ATIS, so you had to wait until you're a little bit closer, tune it up on the radio. She said it looks like they're using 18, and I'm thinking, okay, let me see what we have on 18. Oh, only a VOR and a VOR and an RNAV approach. And on the 88 fleet at Acme right now, we're not allowed to fly RNAV instrument approaches. Now we are. They actually flipped the switch on the MD-90 fleet for those 90s that are equipped with GPS. So had I been in a 90, then it would have been a good thing because I could have flown the RNAV approach, which brings you down a little bit, almost 100 feet lower.
Right.
for the minimums. So I'm thinking, no problem. They have the looked at the NOTAMs. Runway 9 localizer is out of service. I thought, well, that's okay. We'll just use the 27. The winds are right out of the south at about 15 knots, so it'll be, I can put up with a 15 knot crosswind, no problem. And so I told my first officer I briefed the full 27 left ILS approach. I told the first officer when we make initial contact with approach control up there in Flint to request the ILS approach to runway 27. And so he did. And then they said, well, the 9 localizer is not in service, and they're out there working on it, so they had to turn off the ILS for 27 as well, so work on the thing and get it fixed. And I thought, oh, that's not good. Then the realization set in that I was going to have to actually fly this VOR to runway 18, and I've done it once before within the last couple of months, and I know from much better weather that it's a very odd approach. It brings you in at a pretty interesting angle, and the final approach fixes the VOR, which is right over the field. So you're coming in at this weird angle. There is no final approach fix designated on this approach, so it's like one of those where you're on your own, and there is a step down fix that you have to be concerned about. You're pulling that up on your
yeah, I'm just taking a look at it.
yeah, so that what is the fix with the 1560 foot step down HEBUB or something like that?
Yep.
Yeah. So I kind of made a virtual final approach fix just to kind of give myself some good information as far as vertical path was concerned, and we did have the VNAV system giving us information on the vertical path, which was kind of helpful. And so here we go. We're coming down, and I'm thinking I really do hope that the ceiling, let's see, the height above touchdown at the minimum descent altitude is what? It's like 800. No, it doesn't say on that. I'm used to looking at a JEP.
Yeah, I'm used to looking at a JEP as well.
Yeah, I think it was like right at maybe just right below a 600-foot ceiling, like 578. Although our derived decision altitude is the minimum descent altitude, and you add 50 feet to it. So
you do add the 50 feet.
Yeah. So we do these. We call them CANPA procedures, constant. I don't know what it stands for, but anyway, you kind of make yourself a virtual glide path, and typically about 800 feet per minute rate of descent, and you kind of check some other things to make sure it looks like it's going to put you over the threshold at the right point, and we're getting closer and closer, and I'm looking outside and see nothing but white. And then I hear my first officer say, approaching minimums. And I'm thinking, oh no, that's 80 feet above our derived decision altitude. And I'm thinking, oh, please don't tell me I'm going to have to go around. And so kept on going, and then minimums. And right at the last moment, I caught a little glimpse of the airport environment, and shortly thereafter, the actual runway, and continued the approach.
The airport environment, what, McDonald's?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I think it was a Tim Hortons or something. I know, we're not in Canada, but we're pretty darn close.
I love that phrase, I must admit. The airport environment. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so I recognize that area of the ground I was looking at. It looked like the airport environment to me.
Yeah, there's the freeway heading into the airport. Yeah, I've got that.
So we're not going to really discuss any more about this.
Yeah, no one else.
We actually, I saw what I needed to see when we got in, but I'm thinking to myself, I was so close. I mean, I was actually moving, on the throttles that we have, the thrust levers on the MD-88. They're below the knobs of the throttle, and you kind of hit them with the palm of your hand, and the toga button. And did somebody say toga?
Toga!
Yeah.
Toga!
Okay, that's enough. And I thought, okay, so here's the deal. Either they're going to have to get those folks out of the ILS shed and turn that sucker on for the 27 ILS so we can get into the airport, or we're going to go to Detroit. For some reason, I'm slurring my words this morning. Sorry. And I haven't been drinking yet today.
It's left over from last night, is it?
It might be. Or early this morning.
Yeah.
yeah, so no, that was a close one. And then the next day, going back to Atlanta. Oh, you know, the funny thing is, when we got in, the crew that was taking the jet back out to Atlanta, they had come in the day before. And it was funny because I got off the airplane and they looked at me. They were at the end of the jetway near the airplane, and we were getting our bags and stuff off. And I could just look on the look on their faces was like a knowing look, like, you know, you made it in. You know, wasn't that crazy?
Mhm.
And so I had a discussion with them. I said, "Did you guys have any trouble getting in, you know, last night?" And he goes, "Yeah, we had to go around." So they actually had to perform a go around, and they did another one, and they were able to see what they needed to see to get in. And we were just kind of shaking our heads like that was not a lot of fun, but it was good practice for our proficiency. And then the next day we flew to Atlanta, and that was like category 1 minimums, and literally, as we were saying, minimums: approach lights in sight, continue, land, you know, and boom, on the ground.
Yeah.
So it's been an interesting couple of days as far as what I'm sure that many of you listening out there who are pilots, especially professional, do it for a living. Have and if you've been flying the last week or so, you probably have a lot of experience with all these things. But anyway, it was exciting.
It's just like simulator training.
Yeah, exactly. So that's about enough of that. And hey, on today's Friday, so just a couple of days from now, I'm going to be laying over in Kansas City on Monday, and Tom Seagraves, who attended the 300th recording and party over at Dana's house last November, will noticed on my schedule that I was going to be in Kansas City for an overnight. And he said, "Why don't we do an APG meetup?" And I said, "Okay, let's do that." And so Tom is, you know what? He sent me some audio feedback. So let Tom tell you about the pending meetup in Kansas City.
Hey, APG crew, Tom from Columbia, Missouri. Just sending some quick feedback in to let everybody know that this coming Monday, January 15th, we are having an APG meetup in Kansas City. Captain Jeff is going to be laying over that night. And we are going to meet at Arthur Bryant's Barbecue, which is at 1727 Brooklyn Avenue. It's on the corner of 18th and Brooklyn, just east of downtown Kansas City. It's just off of I-70, about maybe a half a mile. So it's very easy to get to. Probably going to be getting there around 6:30 p.m. on Monday, the 15th. I have put a Twitter message on the APG Crew Twitter page. You can contact me that way. My Twitter handle is just simply at Tom Seagraves. And Captain Jeff, feel free to also put my cell phone number in the show notes. Hopefully we've got some APG listeners in the Kansas City area that can join us. And it should be a good time of some good barbecue and a few beers. And a good meeting with Captain Jeff while he's in town. We'll show him some good old Midwest hospitality. Consequently, this is the same barbecue place that I took Captain Nick when he was in Kansas City a couple of years ago, and I got his thumbs up on it. So hopefully, Captain Jeff, it'll be something you enjoy as well. So I look forward to seeing you, Captain Jeff, just a few days, and hopefully we'll see several other APG listeners there as well. Thanks a lot. Talk to you soon.
Wait. Are you telling me that Captain Nick's thumbs were all over the barbecue?
Yep, I was right.
Oh, I'm not going then. Let's go somewhere else.
It was that.
Take me
that
somewhere
was
where
that
Captain
barbecue.
Nick has not been.
That was a great spot. He said, "Did I want to go somewhere, you know, kind of a bit rough, but very traditional?" I said, "Yeah, why not? That sounds fantastic." And indeed, it was brilliant. Bit of a heart stopper when it comes to the cholesterol, but you know, as long as you're not doing it all day, every day, it was absolutely brilliant. Loved it.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. So hopefully, I don't know when I'm going to try to get this episode published either tonight or sometime tomorrow, so that if you're listening to this, and hopefully you've already downloaded it and you're listening to it, and if you're in the Kansas City area, you'll be able to meet up with us. Again, Tom will be picking me up around 6. So we should be at Arthur Bryant's Barbecue at about 6:30ish. And then we'll eat some great food and have some great fellowship amongst the APG community in the Kansas City area. All right. Let's see, what else? Anything else that we need to talk about as far as what's been happening and what's going on in the near future? We talked about the P2K 200th episode party and recording in London, just coming up the end of next, well, I guess about a week from today or a week from tomorrow. Yeah, a week from tomorrow, Saturday.
That's right. Now, if we're going to be pushing out some special broadcasts for our Patreons, I expect, Jeff. So if you've ever thought about becoming a Patreon, now would be an excellent time to join up and start contributing, because, of course, you'll get a lot of extra stuff from us in a week's time. Looking forward to that indeed.
Absolutely. And wow, what a perfect segue. You're such a professional.
Johnny, how much more coffee?
That's not what I meant to play. Here we go.
Johnny, how much more coffee? No thanks.
The Coffee Fund. I love coffee. I love tea. He's got his microphone muted. Java jive and it loves me. Coffee and tea and the Java and me. A cup, a cup, a cup, a cup, a cup. Oh, yeah. Well, the Java Jive plays in the background while we talk about the Coffee Fund and joining the Coffee Fund cadre. And as Nick just mentioned, one of the perks of being part of the Coffee Fund cadre is that you get to hear a private feed of wonderful APG crew logs, where we talk about all kinds of things from, amplified explanations of things, usually of a professional nature, and that's what Nick likes to do. Of course, you're not going to hear anything like that from me. I just talk about what's happening behind the scenes with the crew and the podcast and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, we try to keep it entertaining and informational and give you something extra for supporting the crew and the show, actually, in a financial manner, because we have expenses. We have website hosting costs, we have media hosting costs, equipment costs, and of course we have coffee funds that we need to replenish, so we have plenty of caffeine to keep us awake, especially for Nick on these long overseas flights. And of course, occasionally we'll use some of that money to have a beer or two, and we do appreciate that. And of course, we have a lot of these little meetups here and there, and a lot of the contributions go toward that as well. So if you're someone who has some extra money to contribute to the show, to give us the motivation to keep doing this thing, please consider joining the Coffee Fund cadre by contributing to the Coffee Fund. And you can learn about how to do that by heading over to airlinepilotguide.com/coffee. And since the last episode, let me see if I can find this page. I can tell you that we've had a few contributors to the PayPal Classic method, or the Coffee Fund via the PayPal Classic method. Wow, I'm having trouble making words this morning. And the song is about to end. That's one of the things that's distracting me. I'm thinking, I have a lot more to say, and they're stopping. So I'm going to have to hit the button again. And thank you very much. Very, very nice. Now, why don't you go ahead and sing some more, okay? Okay? Thank you. Let's see here. I think we already talked about Kevin and his nice contribution. Jeff Moeller and Anissa out in Northern California, they set up a recurring payment via PayPal in the Classic method. And we got theirs in for January. Thank you, Jeff and Anissa. And now I'm not sure who this is exactly, but the name that I have here is Simzation. I'm hoping that I'm pronouncing that right. Simzation gave us a great, amazing amount of contribution. Thank you very much for $250. They gave us for the coffee fund. We can drink a lot of coffee and beer, don't you think? And I mean, pay for the expenses of doing the podcast is really what I mean. So thank you very much for that show of support, financial support. Remember, we always say that if you don't have the money to give us a contribution to the coffee fund, don't worry about it. I mean, you need to, take care of yourselves, especially if you're someone out there who is a student and wants to pay flying lessons so that they become pilots like us. So is that song about to end again? Wow. I better hurry up. So let's move on to the coffee fund the other method of contributing to the show, and that's via Patreon. This is a mess, isn't it, Captain Nick?
You've done
Excuse me.
better, old chap.
I have. I'm just out of practice here. Anyway, Patreon as another way to support the show, and we have a lot of patrons, like almost 200, 190, I think, and they give us a certain amount of money per episode. They're patrons of the show, and since the last episode, we have a few who have joined us. Well, first of all, let's talk about Steve Andrus, who edited his pledge and bumped it up $1 per episode. So thank you, Steve. And Dan Brooks, a new producer. Thank you, sir. First Officer Frank pledged $2 per episode. Thank you, sir. Another producer of the show. And Dominic, yet again, another producer has joined us. So thank you, all of you, for becoming patrons of the show. And if you're interested in supporting us, again, you can learn all about it by heading over to airlinepilotguide.com/coffee.
Hold on.
Coffee. Not really. Me and the Java.
Thank the Lord that's over.
A cup, a cup, a cup, a cup. That was painful. Sorry. And now, let's move on to this week's news.
That's why sometimes
Stand the vibe on you.
the show.
What's that?
Helps to be drinking when you do the show.
Yeah, that's true. We do a much better job when we're actually drinking. There ain't no alcohol in this. It's just water. What kind of bar are you running here? Let's start right off the bat with the incident at San Francisco International just a couple of days ago. Looks like an Aeromexico Boeing 737-800 registration X-ray Alpha Mike uniform performing flight 668 from Mexico City to San Francisco was cleared for the approach to San Francisco's runway 28 right. Later cleared to land runway 28 right. Both instructions were read back correctly. The aircraft was descending through about 500 feet AGL when Tower noticed that the aircraft had lined up for runway 28 left instead and not 28 right. And that is when we heard this from the tower.
Aeromexico 668, go around.
Aeromexico 668, going around.
Aeromexico 668, turn left, heading 265. Left, heading 265.
Left heading 265, Aeromexico 668.
Expect at 147, cross runway 1 left. Expect at 668, heading 265, maintain 3,100.
Exact check, 665.
Say again.
Aeromexico 665 to, correction, Aeromexico 665, heading 265, 3,100.
Aeromexico 668, heading 265, 3,100.
November 4 Bravo Charlie, contact NorCal departure.
Departure 4 Bravo Charlie.
Aeromexico 668, contact NorCal 135.1.
135.1.
And Redwood 1041, just to let you know, no one's on final.
Redwood 1041, right?
No one's going to land on top of you.
No one's going.
So she was, I think, a little frazzled from that. She wasn't expecting to have to tell Aeromexico 668, not ExpressJet 665 or Aeromexico 665. Anyway, she wasn't expecting them to line up on the wrong runway and give them a missed approach instruction. And that's understandable. You know, you're kind of like, what? You know, what's going on here? So anyway, she finally got all the, I think the Aeromexico pilots knew that they were talking. She was talking to them, and they got out of the way, got about a 15-degree left vector and a climb away from the runway. And then she was reassuring the Virgin America flight, the Redwood flight, in position on that runway that Aeromexico was about to land upon, that don't worry, nobody else on final out there, nobody's going to try to kill you. Basically reading between the lines. But
it sounded like it was a late go around from air traffic control. I mean, if they had lined up for 28 left, I would have assumed air traffic control would have caught it maybe a little bit earlier. I'm surprised that it says here they were descending through 500 feet.
Right.
AGL. I mean, it's not an excuse, but
well, they said that they were on the ILS, but they may have tuned. I'm thinking what may have happened here, and this happens sometimes. You kind of in your head, you're thinking, okay, we're going to be landing on 28 left,
right?
And you brief the ILS approach for 28 left, and then when you hear approach control tell you that they're vectoring you for an approach to a certain runway, even if they said 28 right, in your head, you're thinking to yourself 28 left.
Yeah. I've seen it as well with the iPads, because a lot of places, when you're not sure if you're going to get the left or right side, you'd load up both approach plates and you'd have them armed with a quick swipe of a finger. You can flip over to the wrong side and you'd brief that. And depending on how you have it zoomed, it may not be apparent that that is the correct plate that you have.
That's a good point.
So,
that's one of the hazards, risks of the electronic flight bag.
Is, I think, zooming and omitting some of the information.
You mean captain's view?
Right.
Where you're like zooming it in as far as it will go, so you can actually see the writing and stuff.
Yeah.
So I would imagine that that's probably one of the human factors that may have resulted in this. But to give the air traffic controller a little bit of a break, have you ever flown into San Francisco International?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so those are pretty darn close runways. Those parallel runways are very, very close.
Yep.
So, in fact, so close that they can't do simultaneous ILS approaches to both runways. They have to have one coming in at an angle to be legal. So, it might be I don't know, from the tower's vantage point, I'm not sure how easy it is to see that an airplane is lined up on the wrong runway. What was the ceiling too? Let me look at that.
I bet you $1,000 they use a radar repeater display up there.
Okay, well, never mind. I'm not going to defend her.
Yeah, because I mean, and you'd have thought with the number of incidents they've had recently, all the controllers in that tower would be really queued up to it at the moment, because they're obviously going to be under a microscope right now, trying to work out why they've had so many incidents in such a short time.
True.
With the potential to be just so horrendous.
And Captain L makes a good point. He's in our chat room. Hey, Captain L.
That's a rare occurrence. Captain L making a good point.
Well, yeah, that's why I had to highlight it.
Fair enough.
He says, discipline comes into play here. Every time ATC states a runway, I look at the landing runway entered into the FMS, the flight management system, the computer.
Yeah.
Good practice, I'd say.
Yeah, but you can still enter the right runway and the wrong frequency, and the airplane will couple to the wrong side.
That's a good point,
and having the runways, depending on the zoom that you have on your navigation display, it may look like everything is fine. So yeah, it is interesting, and they're having a lot of issues obviously there. So
yeah.
Now tell me, I don't know a lot about the Boeing system. Does anyone know if they have an auto ILS tuning capability, or do they manually have to tune up the ILS if they change a runway?
Yeah, on the 7576, you have to manually tune it. And
I would believe, I think the 800 and the 900 737s and perhaps the 700, I mean, the newer generation 73s may have, I don't know for sure though. Maybe somebody out there listening will know.
But it's pretty apparent if if you hold, say, 28 right and you tune 28 left, at some point it's going to give you a message to say a frequency error. So it shouldn't happen, but I can see it happening.
On my airplane, there's nothing that will prevent you from putting in the wrong frequency unless it's not an ILS frequency.
Right.
So you have to be very, very careful on the older technology jets like the one I fly.
Well, that's true. And we should always behave as if we're on a line check and an instrument rating, because and one of the requirements there is to double check that what you've actually got tuned is what you're displaying, and it matches your plate. And there's all those cross-checking things we would always do, meticulously, if we had a line check captain sit behind us, that sometimes people think it's okay not to do on a regular trip. But there you go, this is a proof, possibly. We're double guessing here, but this is possibly a situation where they weren't doing all that stuff.
Yeah, you make a good point there, Nick. A lot of times we'll do things and we're thinking, if the FAA or a line check person is sitting in my jump seat, well, I'm going to do it this way instead. It's always just best to do it the right way all the time. And that way you don't have to change anything when somebody
That's
is
exactly right. Yep.
watching over your shoulder.
It just makes it so much easier.
It does. It may be more of a hassle, a little bit, but in the long run,
right,
probably your life is going to be better.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so we'll see if we hear anything about. Now, interestingly, well, never mind. It doesn't matter. Let's move on to this.
No, we're all going to sit here forever wondering what you were going to say now.
Me too.
I don't know anymore. I think I've had another stroke. I'm not sure what I'm saying or what I was going to say. Let's see. Let's move on to this one, which was a very interesting. And I think that this has been discussed on some other aviation podcasts. So hopefully it doesn't feel like we're, oh, shoot. I forgot to put that sound effect in here. Oh, well. I had a horse neighing. I was going to say, I hope this doesn't sound like we're beating a dead horse. And I don't have it. Oh, wait a minute. There we go. Yeah, sorry. It was loud, wasn't it?
It was.
Jet Airways has fired 2 pilots who allegedly got into a fight and stormed out of a cockpit during a flight, leaving the controls unattended. The Indian Airline said in a statement it had terminated services of both the cockpit crew with immediate effect. The staff involved, a man and a woman, were taken off flight duties following an investigation. The incident occurred on New Year's Day, a New Year's Day flight from London to Mumbai, or Bombay if you prefer, during which the male co-pilot reportedly slapped the female pilot after they got into a heated argument. The female pilot is believed to have left the cockpit in tears, followed briefly by the co-pilot. As a result, the cockpit was left unattended on the flight, which had 324 passengers and 14 crew on board. Aviation safety rules state that at least one pilot should remain at the controls all times during a flight. Oh, why? If the airplane's automated, it doesn't matter, right? Nothing is going to go wrong. The autopilot's just not going to stop working just out of the blue or anything, right? That's never happened, right? Yeah, it happens.
Yes.
It's just, I'm amazed, flabbergasted on this one. I guess when you get into a heated argument, sometimes you forget where you are and what is going on and what your responsibilities are. I think stats show that more accidents, car accidents, happen when people are agitated and upset because they are thinking so much about the fight or maybe the aftermath of a fight or whatever, and they forget about what they're doing in the car and they're speeding or driving recklessly. And so it just makes sense that, if somebody's having a heated argument, a fight, that you may forget that, oh yeah, you know what, I probably shouldn't leave the cockpit because there's nobody else, no more humans up here in the cockpit, and something could go wrong. And so that's obviously, I guess, several of you community members sent this into our feedback, and the first ones kind of trickled in right after this incident, and they were initially grounded and then ultimately fired. And then, Amar, you said that you heard something from somebody, a little bit more information about
it. So from a former Jet Airways pilot that I know, he wasn't on that fleet, but the story that I heard was, and there's some more news surfacing. I did a quick Google search. Apparently, the 2 crew members, they might be married, husband and wife. They're both captains, and the argument had started before the flight. Now I don't know at Jet Airways if if you were married or you could be paired together. I think that's really the number one issue there. But yeah, it is interesting. The male captain, the husband, I guess, he was in the right seat acting as the first officer. So on that flight, I don't know if that had anything to do with it or not. But it'll be interesting to get some more information on that. The only thing I can think about, Captain Nick did a lovely plane tales on that Trident accident, and one of the issues was the heated argument that they had in the pilot's lounge before the flight. So we don't take these things obviously lightly. Yeah, it changes your attitude and your approach towards a flight. So it is a big issue, and having 300 and on the 777, I mean, the amount of people behind you, I mean, this could have been a disaster. So
you make some great points there, Amar, and you're quite right. It was something that we used to have drummed into us when we were in the Air Force, because, of course, there's only one damn pilot. We flew, even if you're in a two-seat airplane, the other guy was usually a navigator or an observer, wizzo, whatever you like to call him. There's only one guy flying the airplane, and if he's hasn't got his mind 100% on the job, anything could happen. Now, at least with two people on the flight deck, you're hoping that if one of them gets agitated, the other one's still in the right state of mind to carry on. But I'm not going to even comment on whether it's a good idea to have a married couple working together on the flight deck. I know a lot of airlines it happens, because I see it regularly pitching up on newspapers. And Mr. and Mrs. blah 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 flew this airplane off together, and they often make a PR stunt out of it. But whatever happens, if you can't keep your tempers and keep your disputes between people who are going to have to work together out of your work environment, then you're in the wrong job, and two, you should certainly excuse yourself from flying that trip. I mean, I don't think there's a company in the world that would be too angry with anyone if they decided to do that, because that is 100% the safest option. So if you get sufficiently upset, say by TSA trying to get to the aircraft, and you're so upset you feel no longer mentally capable of going to work and concentrating on everything that needs to be done, I think it's quite right that you say, look, I'm going to have to take a break before I can fly. So either we delay the flight, you put me on a different flight or something. So, the situation, if it boils up on the ground, you just got to be professional about it, and say, right, this is not a good day for me to fly. I'm going to go home, and I'll come back better when I'm, more stable.
Yeah. I can understand the, wanting, if you're a husband and wife team, you're working for the same airline, you bid the same trip, going out places and almost being like on a second, third honeymoon, like all the time. But on the other hand, if you have a fight or a rocky relationship, I can see where that would be a really bad thing. And and for me, the biggest safety factor for me, if I can handle things going wrong with the airplane, horrible weather and everything else, it's a people thing where you are disagreeing with somebody, or for instance, I remember last year I had to go back to the cabin of the airplane before pushback because there was a passenger there who was seated in the not the economy section, but not the first class section, but that middle area that we call Comfort Plus or whatever. But he did not buy a ticket for that. And the flight attendants asked him to leave and go to the seat that he was supposed to be, or that he was assigned, and he refused. And he said, "Look, you're running late. You've made me miss a day of work." And he was very, very upset. And so finally I went, okay, let me go back and talk to him. And so I finally explained to him that he had to leave this seat, and he had already he had a laptop and a mouse, and he had snaked the mouse wiring through the back of the tray table and everything else, and he was having to rip that through, and he was just having a fit. And I said, "I'm sorry, and I apologize for our schedule ruining your," but I'm sure that you're not the only person on the airplane who has had their lives inconvenienced, at least because of our late operation, and we do apologize for that, but we have to have you go back to your seat. And so anyway, it was a kind of a heated discussion with this guy, and it just made my chest tight, and it made me feel bad because I don't like having negative reactions with other human beings, or interactions, I should say. So I went back up to the airplane. We're taxiing out. It was a long taxi out, but I mean, I could feel my whole body was just agitated, and I couldn't really focus completely on what I was supposed to be doing. And I'm thinking this, and I even had this discussion with my first officer. I said, this is a major safety of flight thing right now. I just need to forget about that and focus on what I'm supposed to be doing here so that we can safely operate the airplane. But I just hate it when I have to go back there and some people do this, without even thinking about it. It doesn't bother them at all. But my pulse goes up and just feel like,
well, kudos to you for recognizing it and speaking up, because a lot of people, they try to hide their feelings if they're upset, and the number one reaction would be denial. No, I'm fine. I'm a pilot. I'm a professional, and I'm gonna got to complete the task.
I told my first officer, I said, just watch. You should be always watching me closely anyway, because I'm Captain Nielsen, and
sure,
you watch me closely, keep me out of trouble. But watch me especially closely now, because I'm still kind of agitated by that interaction with that passenger. So
this can be quite tricky. I mean, from the corporate flying, because we have an open door policy. We don't even have a cockpit door. So a lot of times we don't even have a flight attendant on some of the corporate jets. So it's a delicate balance where you're the captain, yet you got to solve some of the problems that are happening back there. So, and believe me, there can be a lot of problems. So yeah, no, it's not my favorite place to be. I much rather just focus on, flying the airplane.
Yes. And that's what, we're trained to do. And Captain Al, again, making another significant comment. Thank you, Al. Do you have to often deal? I know. Can you believe it? We should probably ring a bell every time we see one.
Absolutely.
Do you often have to deal with this sort of issue? Surely this is a cabin crew matter. Normally it is handled at the cabin crew level and the gate agent level. But I guess the flight attendants were a little frustrated by this whole thing and the fact that they were not being taken seriously. And I probably should have, in hindsight, said, why don't we let our gate agent come on, or the passenger service agent, like somebody specially trained to deal with passengers like this.
Right.
And then I could have stayed away and not have been affected by this. And so that's a good point. And how often does something like this happen? Like maybe once every 10 years, in my experience, or maybe even longer than that. I mean, I can only think of a couple times where I've had to go back and talk to a passenger. And usually when you go back there and you have your hat on and, they can tell this is the captain, they're going, I better, take my things and just shut up and go back to my seat, because I don't want to get kicked off the airplane.
I think the mustache helps too.
Yes, of course. I start, I start, playing with my mustache as I'm going back there.
Who wants
kind of grunting a little bit. But usually as soon as they see that one of the pilots is coming back, then they go, oh, okay, this is serious.
Yeah. I
see that I need to behave myself and we can move on. Anyway, so yeah, it's a tough thing. And I don't know if we're going to hear anything else from this. They're fired. They're dismissed. They're terminated. So I would imagine that that's probably all we'll hear of the story, and hopefully won't hear of any more of these kind of events. An update on a couple of things that we talked about on previous episodes. What is it? The West Wind flight, the ATR 42, I believe, that crashed on December 13th, leaving or flying in Saskatchewan. Crashed at Fond du Lac? Is that the way you pronounce that? Yeah. The Transport Canada was investigating this and realized right away, I guess, that there were all kinds of issues and problems with the way the company was being, at least the operations end of this company were being operated. And they decided to pull their operating certificate. And I don't know if there is anything else going on with that. Do you know, Amar? I mean, I know that you live up there, not in Saskatchewan, of course.
No, I don't. And I was just looking at the Av Herald article. Really one point, and I don't know if it was a contributing factor or not, but I was looking at the weather there around the time of takeoff, and I noticed that the METAR was an auto report, and it was reporting light snow. And in my experience at that time of the day at night, that light snow oftentimes, especially with that temperature, it could be more like moderate snow. So I'm thinking icing could have been a contributing factor. Certainly, the ATRs are known to have flight controls issues with icing. But no, I don't have any more information than what I see online.
Yeah, it was cold and snowing, -9, and light snow, as you said, maybe more than light snow.
Right. Well, you look at the report and you see, it seems decent weather, but it could be deceiving, especially when it's coming from an auto station. But
apparently, Transport Canada and the Transportation Safety Board realized that there were some issues, safety requirements. Let's see, what does it say here? Transport Canada said it had identified deficiencies in the company's operational control system, which ensures that the company's everyday actions comply with safety requirements for things like dispatching personnel and aircraft. And again, I think you're right. I think that icing may have something to do with this accident. So we'll keep our eye on that, see if anything else comes up. And also a follow-up on a news item about the aircraft, let's see, UK drone collision study, where they supposedly tested aircraft windows and drone and impacts and that kind of thing. And let's see, let me read from the report. A British drone collision study used evidence for the government's flagship drone pilot registration law, found that UAVs pose less of a risk to airliners than government officials and trade unions have claimed. The study, which the government refused to reveal in full, that's usually a red flag right there, despite being asked by industry and news media alike, is the key piece of supposedly scientific evidence backing its proposed drone bill. The parliamentary bill is due to be published in spring this year. It will create new criminal offenses targeted at flyers of drones that weigh more than 250 grams who fail to register with the government and pass mandatory safety tests before using aircraft. Now, we all want that, right? I mean, we want to have these kind of rules in effect to keep, airplane and drone collisions at a minimum. But I guess the a press release summary of the drone collision study, first published when the government revealed its registration plans last year, was used by airline pilots trade union BALPA as evidence of a proven drone collision threat. However, when you read the full study, they found that for airliners, the risk posed was far less alarming than both the union and the Department of Transport had claimed. Instead of penetrating cockpit windows, rigorous tests of drones launched against Airbus A320 windscreen panes fitted to a test bed cockpit found that drone airliner collisions will crack but not penetrate such windows. So, I don't know. Is this getting too picky here, or?
Is it just? I mean, there's definitely a good reason for this article. It's being touted as trying to my words are disappearing. Jeff, is this catching?
Yes, you must be catching what I'm having right now, which is
I know.
Trying to make words that
they're trying to diss this report basically, and say, well, because we found some inconsistencies, and it may be that this drone didn't fully penetrate the windshield, and what's more, they had to be going quite fast for it to happen. I think it's all that's in the report. I certainly read the report, the BALPA report, in full when it came out, and I'm going, well, if it doesn't entirely penetrate the windshield in this one example, perhaps if they kept on going for long enough, they would have found one that did fully penetrate. Now, how much of a risk do you want to take? Whether it goes part the way through the windshield or all the way through the windshield, I don't really care. If it makes a significant amount of damage to the windshield, that's enough for me. They make it sound like this report is rubbish, so we shouldn't have any regulation on drones. I think that's what they're trying to achieve. It's the other end of the scale. It's written with a bias for drone operators. I see nothing in what they're trying to draw out of the report that really justifies a reduction in our strong attitude towards the danger that drones present when they're irresponsibly flown.
So is this a case of the media just like overreacting and trying to, squash fake news? And that's a common
Well, I
term
think this
now.
particular reporter is trying to.
And what and are there drone organizations formally protesting the results of the study, or
Not that
I
I've
didn't see that
seen
in the article.
in great numbers, but having read this and another similar report written from the drone operator's point of view, they're certainly trying to say, look, the government are trying to base all their legislation on a poorly conducted trial. So it shouldn't go ahead. The government should be allowed to do this. And I'm going, well, I don't care. It's pretty obvious to most of us that there could be a significant amount of damage done, and whether it penetrates the windshield or takes out an engine, we haven't done any trials on that. So we all still think that flying lumps of metal and lithium batteries around that weigh several kilograms in the path of airliners is dangerous. Anyone who tries to argue the opposite because they're trying to pick holes in a scientific study because it wasn't conducted to their liking, I think well, that is wrong. And what's more, to solve it, we need to have a properly funded, fully funded government study, because don't forget, this was funded partly by BALPA, who are just a pilots union, and we're trying to do what's safe, and they don't have huge funds to conduct.
They need to increase their dues, is what they need to do, so they have more funding to do these studies.
Yeah, therein lies the problem. I'm already paying like 150 quid a month to BALPA for my dues, so I don't want to have to pay more just to have another study. What I want is the drone industry and the government and perhaps Farnborough to get together. The Royal Aircraft Association, I don't know what it's called nowadays, Quantico or whatever, to get together and do some. And I'd like it to be done in America, and I'd like to be done elsewhere with where it can be properly funded, and to prove one way or the other. But even if they prove that it's not possible to smash a drone right through an airliner's windshield, I still don't want to be mixing with these bits of kit. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, there you go. That is everything that I had in the news folder for this show. And that means that it's now time for us to move on to the best part of the show, which is, of course, your feedback.
Captain, incoming message.
We'll start off with this from David. Jeff, Nick, Dr. Steph, and Dana. This video popped into my feed, and then he has a link to a YouTube video where we watch a Captain Victoriano, land a 747 on a short runway. I don't know how short the runway was, but so the cockpit is fitted with looks like a GoPro camera or something like that, and it's kind of interesting to see how the captain really manipulates the controls to bring that airplane down to the runway and land safely. And David says, "Now I see why Miami Rick spends so long at the gym. Man, that looks like hard work. Please tell me the European and even the American Airbuses are more sophisticated. Best regards, as always." And he says,
what do you mean, even the American Airbuses? They're all just Airbuses.
Yeah, I know.
It doesn't matter where they're
I guess
made.
it doesn't matter where they're made.
Yeah, or who flies them.
So here's the deal. I look at this thing and I'm thinking, well, at first glance, it looks like he's, really manipulating the controls a lot. But you know what? If you ever pay attention to it when you're coming into land, I mean, if you have the presence of mind to think about it while you're manually manipulate, whether it's the side stick controller or the yoke itself, and I think it's much more pronounced with the yoke because it's like right there in front of you, and other people can see, and you can see the yoke that's in front of you that you're not touching moving around quite interestingly. If you pay attention, most of the time we're looking out the window, we're looking at instruments, we're not really looking at the controls and what we're doing with them. But there is a lot of movement going on, even with the even with the autopilot on, if you happen to look at how the autopilot is flying the airplane, that thing is really moving around quite a bit, especially as you get lower and lower and closer to the runway. And I've seen video of like a camera aimed at the side stick controller, and I was kind of like, wow, I can't believe that there is so much movement and manipulation. We talked about this on earlier episodes, Nick, that it looks like that side stick controller is getting worn out, and you're thinking, is that really necessary? And of course, in the case of the airplanes that have fly-by-wire systems, they're probably taking half of those control inputs and saying, "No, I don't think we need to do that. No, we're not going to do that." But and then of course, this airplane, the 747, I'm not sure what version of it is, but well, I guess they're still not fly-by-wire. The 777 is, but not the 747. So that's actually cables going back to hydraulic, manipulators. But anyway, my take from this whole thing is I didn't really think that it was that unusual with the motions that he was making, and Amar is watching this video right now as we're speaking. What do you think, Amar?
Well, first of all,
because you fly an airplane that's very similar to this,
half the size, but yeah, very similar. Kudos to Airclips. I mean, I love their these videos. It's phenomenal. It's nice having that perspective. It looks perfectly normal to me. I don't see, in the Boeings, I do notice, I mean, you've got a big yoke in front of you. So there is a lot of movement, even with the autopilot. So, coming off of the Falcon, it was a fingertip airplane, and, the yoke hardly, it would move, but not as much as the Boeings. So I would imagine, especially with an airplane the size of the 747, I mean, you'd have to put quite a bit of input to, persuade the airplane to turn. It looks fine to me.
Yeah, didn't look unusual to me either, and didn't look like he was using like a lot of force to move. It's probably if somebody who has not ever flown a very large transport category airplane doesn't realize that there is an aspect of like power steering in it. It's not like not like my airplane where you're actually moving control cables all the way back to the control surfaces. It's kind of mostly light to the touch.
Right.
So what do you think, Captain Nick?
Well, Captain Al, as always, makes another good remark.
Does he?
So well done, Al. He points out that side stick deflection is not going to move the controls surfaces. You're asking the aircraft to achieve a roll rate or a pitch rate. Having said that, of course, as you come closer to the ground in a landing, it does blend into direct loss. So eventually you have got just literal control over the actual control surfaces, and that normal flying law is sort of blended out so that you can, when you're close to the ground, the aircraft behaves very conventionally. So what you're asking for is a rate, and quite often when you apply a rate in the aircraft starts maneuvering, you won't actually have got the flight controls to where you actually want them, because the hydraulics, despite how powerful they are, they can't actually move those big flight controls as fast as we can thrash the stick, or I'm guessing on a more conventional airplane, you can move the yoke. So you could whack the yoke across, but it's going to take significantly longer for the ailerons to actually reach that full deflection you've just demanded. And before they get there, you're quite likely to have centered the yoke now because you've made the correction you want to. So you just want it to get to where you want it nice and quickly. So you're going to throw the controls over there, and then you're going to put it back to somewhere in the middle, which is exactly what you wanted. But you're actually moving the control or the control stick a lot. The actual aircraft may not be being changed in its flight path very much at all, because you're not leaving it there long enough for it to have a big effect.
Absolutely. So bottom line is, David, that was no big deal. Okay. Thank you for your feedback, though.
Yeah, you do need to be big and beefy, though, to fly those old dinosaurs, don't you?
Absolutely.
Whack an array of those. I mean, how much do all those wires weigh when you've got quarter-inch steel cables go right the length of the aircraft? That must be quite a bit of weight you've got to heave around. It's not like you're doing it with any kind of, I don't know, it's not like your car where you've got power steering, is it?
Mm-hmm.
Not those old airplanes. So that's why you've got such big muscles, Jeff. Is that right?
Oh yeah. That's why.
Yeah. And I've got two really sensitive dinky fingers.
Okay.
They were saving on weight. They just drained all the hydraulic fluid.
Oh, that helps.
That does lighten things up a bit. Yeah. All right. Let's see. Moving on, we have some feedback from Frick. To feed or not to feed? That is the question.
Oh, great. I always end up sitting next to a damn baby. What? What'd you just say?
Stewie, stop fussing.
Not now, Lois. Hey, big man, turn around. If you've got something to say it to my face. Oh, you can't hear me now. All right, that's it. I was going to watch the movie, but forget it. For the next 5 hours, you're my bitch. Where? My ears are popping and there's no way to console me. I'm hungry and possibly teething. Maybe I'm wet. Who knows? I'm a baby. Where?
That from the Family Guy show. Sorry about the harsh language. We'll take care of that in the audio podcast.
That is such a good show.
So, and that was Amar's idea, by the way. So if you have any hate mail, send it to amar@gmail.com. Well, that's probably not really his address. But,
no, it's Amar at airlinepilotguide.com.
Okay, there you go. So Frick goes on. He says, sends this article, Breastfeeding Mom Kicked Off Spirit Flight for Non-Compliance. A Houston woman, her elderly parents, and her 2-year-old son were kicked off a Spirit 2-year-old son. Okay. Were kicked off a Spirit flight at the George Bush Intercontinental Airport Friday morning for non-compliance with crew instructions after being told to stop breastfeeding her son and buckle him in the seat. Mia Rui, or May Rui, a concert pianist and cancer researcher, was on her way to New York City to take part in a recording session for a clinical cancer study. Trouble began when the 6:30 a.m. flight was repeatedly delayed due to insufficient de-icing solution. Rui wrote in a now deleted post on Facebook. She began breastfeeding her young son in an attempt to quiet him down and get him to sleep on the 3-hour flight. And this is a quote from her. Every parent with a young child can imagine you don't want to be that parent on the plane. It would be very embarrassing. I was just trying to avoid that. She claims a crew member asked her to stop breastfeeding and buckle her son into his seat before takeoff. She wrote that the airplane door was still open and asked the attendant for a few more minutes to finish nursing her son before the doors closed. However, a representative for the airline said reports confirmed that the door was already closed at this time. She says, I explained to them both that giving me a couple more minutes to finish nursing him would prevent him from crying and disturbing the other passengers. I did not stop breastfeeding him promptly. They went back and at that point must have called the captain. I didn't want to cause any trouble, so I immediately pulled my son off and buckled him into the seat, which set off uncontrollable crying for the next 25 minutes, to the great dismay and earache of everyone on the plane. She wrote that on Facebook. She and her family were then allegedly asked to leave the plane, where they were met by airline staff and airport security, who told them that they would not be allowed back on board. It's not like I was resistant. I put him in the seat, she told the Post. If they had shown compassion, it wouldn't have happened. They didn't have to let it escalate. Anyway, so it goes on. So she's upset because she was kicked off the flight because she was breastfeeding. But again, I kind of, we weren't there, but it seems to me that, and we've seen these kind of situations before, we ask a passenger to do something, they don't comply in a reasonable amount of time, and then they finally say, and maybe they ask a few more times, and then they finally say, well, is this passenger going to be a problem once we're in the air, when we have a lot fewer solutions to problems? And they probably made the decision, yeah, we better take them off. But the first thing that came to my mind was, wait a minute. So this lady is breastfeeding her child, but the child has an assigned seat. Mm-hmm. Because I'm thinking, this is a small, baby, and it's probably going to be an infant in arms that doesn't have a seat. I mean, how old is this kid? And I guess it says right at the beginning, 2 years old. Now, my wife breastfed our children to about the year point. I guess it's not unusual that some mothers breastfeed longer than that. So that's not such. So in this case, I think that the problem was the fact that she wasn't really being compliant, and it wasn't until she was threatened with, being thrown off the airplane that she actually complied with their instructions. I don't know. What do you think? Maybe I'm taking this wrong.
It seems to me like they were a bit unsympathetic, a little bit. We've got one way to solve this, and this is to get you off the airplane. It didn't look like they made much of an attempt to compromise. And quite honestly, the delay in getting them off the aircraft, and if they're carrying baggage, getting that off the aircraft is probably going to exceed the time she was going to do to finish up her quick breastfeed and get going. There are lots of ways to solve these problems, and I think if you come together in a reasonable manner and try and work through them, they generally speaking resolve without any hassle. It sounds to me like they were unusually heavy-handed, and when you've got a breastfeeding woman with a very young infant who's going to get very upset if you kick her and their entire family off the airplane, then that's almost going to certainly hit the news. So I don't know. I think people just need to think a little bit sometimes outside the box and go, what's the potential delay? What's going to happen here if we let the lady continue? Or perhaps just say, well, perhaps you could finish up as quickly as you can because, we want to get going and you can't hold the baby. It's got a seat or whatever. But I'm with you. If it's a 2-year-old, it should be quite happy to be being held. I mean, that's all the way all the infants are.
I think it's under 2, I think, is the rule in the U.S. If it's
okay,
under 2 years old, then it can be held and doesn't require a seat. But as soon as you hit the magic 2 years old,
well, yeah, it could be nearly 3, couldn't it? It could be 2 and 11 months. That's a reasonably sized child. But anyway, it seems to me that we've got one side of the story, not the other. So until we see,
the article does go on to say that we were forced to remove a passenger from Flight 712 after they refused to comply with crew instructions several times while the doors were closed during taxi and safety briefing. So I don't know if the airplane was actually already moving and taxiing.
Yeah, well, that makes it sound like it was.
Yeah, it does. The way the words they use there.
Yep.
I don't know. Again, these things are always, well, it depends on who you're talking to, what kind of story you're going to get here. But
they've issued a full refund. So if the customer was really in the wrong and refusing to do the safe thing, then why would you do that?
Yeah. I think that Frick mainly sent this in because he knows that Captain Nick likes this subject. Subject of breastfeeding.
I don't know where he got that impression from.
I don't either. No. I have no idea. No. Okay, that's enough of that. Philip sent in some very nice feedback. He said, hope you're all doing well and having a good day. I started listening to the podcast only a few weeks ago, and I'm pretty sure I've caught the APG syndrome, and I think I'm ready to submit my first feedback.
That didn't take long. You must be very susceptible.
Yeah, he must be very weak.
Weak-willed.
Weak-willed. Hey, you're on my boat. This podcast has basically replaced music in my life. We're responsible for him not listening to music anymore. Darn it. We're sorry. And I've been working backwards listening to the podcasts. I have discovered that it helps me to stay concentrated.
Well, I hope he doesn't drive a bus, because if he's working backwards, that could be very dangerous.
Yeah, or just walking. I mean, that could be a problem.
Absolutely.
Watch out. Hey, where are you going, dude? Anyway, discovered that it helps me to stay concentrated at the internship I'm doing, but at times I have to force myself not to laugh out loud and look like an idiot in front of my colleagues.
Guilty.
Yeah, I think we all are. I'm switching departments in January, and I really hope I'll still be able to listen to the podcast while I'm at work. Yeah, I'm 20 years old from Switzerland and have been a fan of aviation for 10 years, and it never ceases to amaze me. My best memory from aviation must be when I was able to sit in the jump seat on a flight from Paris to Zurich on a major Swiss airline. Not too many to choose from. This podcast and flight sim, however, seems to have increased my love for aviation, if that's even possible, that I've decided to register for a pilot screening offered by the Swiss government/military, which is specifically aimed at 16 to 21-year-olds to identify if they would be suitable to start a career as an Air Force pilot, an airline pilot, a private pilot, or as an air traffic controller. If one passes the screening, you're invited to an aviation training camp where you will gain your first experiences in operating an aircraft. It's the Swiss gateway to becoming a pilot. If you don't pass the screening, that doesn't mean you can't become a pilot. However, flying lessons are extremely expensive here in Switzerland. Therefore, camp is supposed to help young people to make a decision whether they want to take the leap and start a new career or start a career in aviation or not. Anyway, hopefully this isn't too long of a feedback. No, not at all. And I'm looking forward to every episode I haven't listened to yet. Wishing everybody blue skies from snowy Zurich. And again, that's Philip. And Philip, all of us on the APG crew and in the APG community are sending really, really good thoughts your way for you to do extremely well in your pilot screening. And please let us know how that went. And if you're selected to be in that aviation training camp. And
absolutely.
From there.
I mean, if he ends up in the military, I think the Swiss have F-18s, so that would be a really neat airplane to get onto. So I can just
imagine experience with that one.
No, not a lot. I can just imagine what it would be like. I mean, flying through the Swiss Alps in an F-18. I mean, how cool would that be?
Oh, amazing,
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, and the Swiss pilots they're pretty sharp pilots out there. So
yeah, I wonder if like the Swiss Guard, they have to wear those funny clothes though. But
I think they do. Yeah.
Yeah, when
Or
they're
they have
flying.
helmets that are painted in those funny colored
Yeah.
hats.
Yeah, and they have big funny shoes. Anyway, so hope not.
Kind of messes with the rudder pedal actuation.
Yeah. But good luck with the camp. I mean, I think you'd enjoy it regardless. And yeah, that would be fun. Anything to do with airplanes, if you're a true aviation lover, would be good fun.
Yes. Okay, why can't I find... Oh, here it is.
Speaking
I
of
found it.
rudder pedals,
Yeah.
I think that's a good segue to another feedback that you got.
Okay.
Let's see here. Head scratcher?
Okay.
Is that the one?
Let's see. Let me see if I can find it.
Run.
Okay. Let's move to Amar.
one
Thinks we have a good
or-
segue talking about rudder
No, wait,
pedals.
maybe that may not be it. Sorry.
No, that's
Never-
not it.
Yeah. Rookie mistake.
Amar, let the professionals do this.
Yeah. No, back to me.
Where are we going to find one of those?
I don't know. But we should, all of us, let the professionals do this. We're just rank amateurs for sure. Do we have something about rudder pedals? in there?
I thought there was. Maybe not. Anyways.
Okay.
Sorry. Carry on.
Hey, okay, thanks. How about this then? Nothing to do with rudder pedals, but this is from Nick, who is a former ramper. His thoughts on regarding ground flight deck communications during pushback and startup. We had some feedback about that not that long ago, and he wants to put in his 2 cents worth. So take it away, Nick.
Hey, APG crew and community members, this is Nick from Columbus, Ohio. I used to be a former ramp agent for a U.S. airline that only flies the 737. And with that being said, I thought maybe I would give a little bit of feedback here in my 2 cents, if it's even worth that, regarding the recent discussion from episode 303 about the communications between the ground crew and the flight deck during a pushback and engine startup. I have to preface that by saying that I don't actually work for Acme Airlines. So it could be different at Acme and it could be for nothing. But in my experience, the communications between the ground crew that's actually doing the pushback, driving the tug and communicating with the captain and first officer, that communication is very scripted and fairly cut and dry from the company point of view. And the company does that, for a very specific reason. They're looking to standardize those communications across all aircraft fleets because they want it to be something from the ground crew point of view that anyone on day one can step into the job and, know how to say, hey, the inspection is complete, the bypass pin is in, and you guys are cleared to start engine 2, then 1, or whatever the communications are. The ramp position is one that is not necessarily a skilled position, and so that's why they look to just kind of streamline the communications and all of the tasks associated with it, like I said, so that anyone at any of the outstations can do the job. And I think Dana was kind of hinting towards that the ground crews don't necessarily differentiate their communications based upon whether or not it's a 737 or an MD-80. They're just going off of the script that they were given during their initial training. And Captain Jeff, I also see his point of view that, well, I'm in an MD-80. Why do you care what engine I start? They're up high. They're not going to touch anything. They're not going to suck anything in from the ground. And if I start one engine, as opposed to the other one, it's in the same exact position, more or less, as the other engine. So, why do you tell me to start one and not the other? Again, I think what it comes down to is just what the company policies and protocols are. And the companies are the ones that determine what it is the ground crew is going to say. From my experience with my airline, we did have a set script, for things that we were supposed to say to the flight deck, and their responses were supposed to be scripted back to us as well, if you will. We had two different types of startup procedures. The first one was just your normal startup procedure. And with that, the pushback driver would tell the captain that he or she was cleared to start engine 2, then engine number 1. The reason for that, the aircraft that I worked with was a 737, and those engines hang pretty close to the ground. So during the pushback, the wing walker would be located on the number 2 side, and if there was a problem with that engine, he or she would notice that fairly quickly and could alert the pushback driver, and we could, stop the pushback, let the captain know that there was an issue. So that's why we would start 2, then 1. The other reason for that being that the jet bridge is pulled up to the number 1 side of the aircraft. That's kind of a secondary issue in and of itself. I don't think there's any real risk that the number 1 engine is going to somehow ingest something from the jet bridge. But I guess that, could be a safety concern. And so that was part of it as well. The other type of start that we did was a non-normal start, and that would be an air start. So when the aircraft had an inoperative APU, we would use an air start unit. Now in that situation, the procedure was reversed. And so instead of telling the captain that they could start the number 2 engine and then the number 1 engine, we would tell them that you're cleared to start the number 1 engine and then the number 2 engine. And again, on the MD-80, it probably doesn't matter because of how high up those engines are. But on a smaller, or I shouldn't say a smaller aircraft, but on an aircraft that has the engines lower to the ground, that communication can be very, very important. Take, for example, the 737. The air start unit has to be positioned on the number 2 side of the aircraft because, as I said before, the jet bridge is on the number 1 side. Well, that air start unit has a long hose that is inside of the safety zone and inside the ingestion zone for the engines. And not only that, during the air start, a member of the ground crew is actually directly underneath of the aircraft fuselage between both of the engines. And so if the crew's not paying attention, if the ground crew says the wrong thing, and you tell them to start the number 2 engine, you run the very real risk of accidentally ingesting the hose from the air start unit, or, in a very bad situation, potentially, although unlikely, but still potentially, even ingesting a member of the ground crew. So, again, I think kind of what Dana was saying was that the ground crew is not necessarily given a different set of instructions and communications for the MD-80, for the CRJs, for the 737, the 767, the A320, et cetera, et cetera. The ground crew has a fairly straightforward job regardless of what aircraft it is that they're working on. And so because of that, their communications are scripted. And I think, Captain Jeff, that's probably why you hear the ground crew telling you, hey, you're cleared to start 2, then 1, one, then two, whatever it is at Acme. And, to answer your question, does it matter which, why do they tell me this? Well, it really doesn't, probably for the MD-80, MD-90. I think what it is, it's just a force of habit that the company has told, the ground crew, this is what you're supposed to say to every aircraft, regardless of, what type of aircraft it is, to simplify their job and make it something that's easy for someone to learn and become accustomed to. So anyways, hope that makes sense. Don't want to beat a dead horse, but just thought I'd, throw my 2 cents there. Thanks, guys. Keep up all the great work.
Well, it matters to me, Nick. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, you make a lot of good points there. More than likely, it's the way they were trained, and they have canned scripts that they say, and really aren't thinking about what the actual meaning and implication is, and that kind of thing. So now, I was just telling Amar while you were we were playing your feedback. I told him that when I hear something like clear to start number 2 or whatever, which is a little bit out of the ordinary, I just kind of understand that what they mean is that the engines are clear to start, and I just start up in the normal fashion. Right. So, yeah.
Well, we can't do that, of course, because where our engines are, some tugs can't get us round a corner if we start the wrong engines. If they're going trying to do a sharp turn and we've got the wrong engines going, it's pushing against the tug, and they're on the outside of the turn where they'd impinge a lot. They don't like that. Sometimes it's important from that point of view. The other thing is, of course, your jet blast on one side of the aircraft might be playing on something that they're swinging through, whereas the other side it might not. So what I'll usually say is, what they'll usually say is, you're clear to start. They don't specify, and I tell them what order, and I'm going to run them in. And if there's a problem, they usually come back and say, "Oh, can you hold off on the inboard engines or the outboard engines or whatever the request is?" Because I can't see what's behind me, but. Yeah, I don't see that they should tell you which engines to start. I think they should, unless there is a problem, in which case they say, do you mind, or would you, make it like the captain's choice rather than theirs?
Yeah, Amar was saying the same thing. The airplanes that he's flying now have wing-mounted engines.
Engine-mounted engines.
Engine-mounted wings. No.
On the wings.
They're engines that are hanging out there on the wings.
Show your part.
Yeah. Well, I try. I've gotten this far with people thinking I was.
Yeah, you've done well.
Yeah, thank you. But of course, on his Falcon jet and the airplanes that I'm flying, with the T-tails and the tail-mounted engines, it really matters not. But good points made, both Nick and Captain Nick. So appreciate your feedback. And then, earlier, Amar had said that that's a great segue, talking about rudder pedals. We found the piece of feedback that he was searching for, and it was kind of combined. It's kind of a combo feedback from.
Well, I realize podcasting is not my thing. I'm glad I can find the autopilot engage button so quick. Otherwise, I won't have a career.
Louisiana Steve sent in a couple of items here. The second one he sent in was the issue with a flight control problem. A man who prosecutors said crashed a small plane in southeastern Virginia when his prosthetic leg got caught in the aircraft's brake, pleaded guilty Tuesday to flying without a license. Robert Gray Jr. entered the plea in federal court in Norfolk, Virginia. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Virginia said in a news release. Gray, 55 years old, has been around aviation for 40 years, buying and selling planes, and once had a student pilot certificate that had expired. Court documents show.
It's the thought that matters.
Yeah, well, you don't have to know that much to fly airplanes, right? Gray has a prosthetic leg and medical conditions that disqualified him from holding a pilot's license. On July 22nd, Gray crashed his 1972 Piper aircraft at Umflet Airstrip in Suffolk, according to court documents. As the plane landed, prosecutors said, it went off the runway, spun halfway around, and hit several small trees. When first responders arrived at the crash, Gray, who was not hurt, at first denied flying the plane and said that the pilot was missing.
He was stuck under the rudder pedals.
I don't know what happened to him. Obviously, I couldn't be the pilot because look, I have a prosthetic leg. And they weren't buying it. When law enforcers started to search for the allegedly missing pilot, Gray admitted that he was the only person on board the aircraft. A few days after the crash, Gray told a safety inspector with the Federal Aviation Administration that the crash was his fault, and he lacks feeling on his right side because of the prosthetic leg.
Hang on a minute. What was the name of that hijacker that jumped out with all the money?
D.B. Cooper.
Yeah, perhaps he was the pilot.
Oh, he could have been, yeah.
Yeah. They never found him.
Caused the leg to become stuck on the aircraft's brake, causing it to spin out on landing. That happens. Anyway, let's see. Gray, who has mobility issues that require the use of a walker or motorized scooter, told the FAA inspector that he should not have been flying a plane because he can barely drive a car. Man. Thank you.
Getting better.
Yeah, Louisiana Steve. Good stuff, man.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Thank you. He knew we'd chuckle on that or at that. Let's see.
Yeah.
The other thing that he sent in was I was unlucky enough to be stuck in Atlanta for the recent power outage. Oh, sorry, Louisiana Steve. While attempting to rebook online with Acme, I got the following message while attempting to pay. Shame on you, Jeff. Shame. And then he has sent an attachment that shows the basically a screenshot of what he was looking at on his telephone. It was kind of rude. On this one screen that we're looking at here, and I'll put this in the show notes, you can look at it yourself. Enhance your experience. Make your trip as comfortable as possible. And then there's an extra add-on fee, and it's entitled Airport Electricity for $139. So at the bottom, there's a button that says, no thanks, continue to be stranded. And then the second button says pay up. So that's just a shameful, you're right, Steve, shameful that we were taking advantage of the situation to make some more money.
Absolutely. And that $139, that's quite expensive for a bit of airport electricity. No.
Well, speaking of airport electricity, I remember a couple of weeks ago, we were just pushing back in Vancouver in the middle of the night, and it was coming down. Initially, it was RVR 5,000, and I think it came down to probably below 1,200 RVR at some point. So we pushed back onto the taxiway. We were on the south side of the field, and Tower was just getting ready to switch the airport to low visibility operations. I guess they would have to reposition some lights, maybe the stop bar, turn it on. Anyways, at that point, there was an aircraft just getting ready, or it was actually rolling down the runway, and they switched the airport to LVOP, low visibility operation, and all the lights went out. I think it was a Dash 8 they rejected on the runway. And I was thinking to myself, wow, I mean, that would be interesting. Here you are planning an auto land, and you start seeing some lights and everything disappears. It's pretty scary. I mean, you would think, with these massive airports, such as Atlanta and Vancouver and the big airports, that there would be multiple redundancies, that this is not even a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, anyway.
That reminds me of a story we talked about where I guess it was like a newly certificated private pilot was flying with somebody, a couple people in his, I think it was a Cessna 172 or whatever, and up flying around, and all of a sudden all the power went out on his airplane. And so he's struggling to communicate with air traffic control and try to find the airport and everything else. And the pilot controlled lighting was on, and he could see the runway, and he was coming in, and I don't know how high above the ground, maybe a couple 100 feet above the ground, all the lights went off. And I think he had a handheld radio, so he could have, clicked the 5 times or whatever to continue, because of the pilot controlled lighting, I believe, only stays on for 15 minutes.
Right.
For each. Yeah. So it was kind of startling, he said in the video, but he had enough ambient light that he continued to a landing.
Right.
You guys are reminding me that I'm heading off to Lagos tomorrow.
Oh, nothing could go wrong there.
No, yeah.
No, we never have blackouts there.
no VIP movement going to happen in the middle of the day where they're going to shut down the airport.
No. Does remind me of a mate of mine who was doing the night vision goggle trials in the Phantom. And they just acquired these bits of kit, and they weren't fixed on using the kind of a permanently specially made harness. They were just kind of jerry rigged up to see how well they were going to work, and they were very pleased with them. And they were up flying some approaches into a little Scottish airfield, a civvy airfield, and he's doing these night approaches, and he said, okay, now I think I've got the hang of this. Will you turn all the airfield lights out? I'll make my next approach just using the goggles. And being a Phantom, when you even if you're doing a roller, you land the airplane very firmly. It's just kind of the Navy way. It wasn't designed to be flared. And as he hit the runway, little firmer perhaps than he expected, the NVGs fell off. And of course, he's on the runway at night with no air.
Going very fast.
Going very fast. He just kept everything in the middle, selected full burner, and when he thought an appropriate amount of time had gone by, he heaved back, and luckily they stayed on the tarmac.
Wow. That deserves a wow. That's funny. Oh boy. You know what? I just realized that we really didn't get a chance to talk with Amar a little bit more about, how he got to where he is as a freight dog, first officer. We first learned about Amar from being involved in the APG community, and I had a layover up in Toronto, and we got together and had some good pizza and what else? Great conversation and all that kind of stuff. And at the time, you were a corporate pilot.
Yep.
Very nice airplane that you were flying.
I do miss it. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden noticed on the social media that you announced that you were leaving that cush job to fly for the freight outfit. So how did you get involved in flying to begin with?
Well, it would have been maybe at the age of 4 or 5 years old. We took a flight on an L-1011 from Toronto to Jordan in the Middle East. And I think I had my face imprint stuck on that window because I was looking out that window the entire flight. And I think I was hooked then. The noises that the airplane made and, just the thrill of a flight. So I was hooked. I lived in the Middle East most of my young life and moved back to Canada when I was ready to go back to school. Finished up high school actually in Mississauga, which is just outside of Toronto, and went to university. Really, I mean, to my parents, they kind of had two careers. It's either you're an engineer or you're a doctor, and I thought to myself, okay, well, I'll try to. I've always had an interest in medicine, and it's been something that I've wanted to do. So I went into McMaster University and studying pre-med. Met my my wife. She continued on, and she's a successful nurse. So that was great. But I left the program at year 2, and decided to pursue flying. At that point, I already had a private pilot's license, and so I decided to pursue it professionally, and took one of those 1-year programs that gives you, takes you from 0 to hero in a rush, and I did that. When I graduated at the time with 200 hours, there was really very little jobs. This was sort of post 9/11 era, and it was kind of between 9/11 and 2007. So it's almost like every time I felt like I've had the right experience for the right job, something would happen. So anyways, I joined an outfit out of Ottawa that does surveys in Cessna Caravans and Twin Otters and other type of aircrafts.
Aerial surveys?
Aerial survey, low-level aerial survey,
Okay.
flying airplanes, hand flying them 8, 9, 10 hours a day. So that was great experience. Enjoyed it. And that job left me due to the economics at the time. So we brought most of the airplanes back. So it was interesting ferrying a caravan across the Atlantic. That was a lot of fun. And came back to renew my IFR at a local flying school, and the chief pilot at the time who was doing the training offered me a job if I did my instructor rating. So I did that. I instructed for just under 1 year. It was great fun. I enjoyed it, but I really thought, for me, naturally, I'm quieter. So being an instructor really wasn't for me. So I enjoyed it, met a lot of good people. And so I left instructing and stumbled into the corporate world. I flew smaller airplanes and then got onto the Citation. The company that I was working for, they had a medevac operation out of Toronto. On the Citation, I was based in Windsor. It's near Detroit. So I really wanted to get back to the Toronto area, and the company I was working for, they had Lear 35s, and they were operating those medevac around the world. So I did that for about just under 5 years. It was great fun. No kids at the time, so it was easy to pack your bag and who knows where you're going. Get called and I'd say, yeah, we're going to send you to Punta Arenas. And you think to yourself, where is that? And you do a quick Google search and it's like, just near Antarctica. And you do that 3 hours at a time in a Lear 35. And the back is crammed with, a couple nurses and doctors. And so it was a great experience. It was flying around the world with primitive airplanes. And so I really enjoyed that. Left that to get the cushy Falcon job. It was sort of an ad in the hangar that I was at. And I applied, got the job, and it was great. Initially, it was a first officer position, sit in the right seat, don't do much. Very quickly, that translated into a captain position, and got upgraded to fly the 900 as well. It was initially a Falcon 50 that I was hired to fly. So that was great, but in the background, as the years were unfolding and the airline world became profitable again, and everybody was, I was watching some of my students, they were airline pilots, and I thought to myself, well, I better.
Hey, wait a minute.
I got an itch to scratch here. So I learned about this cargo outfit, and the opportunity to go straight on to the 7576 with promises of quick upgrades was pretty interesting. So I thought to myself, well, this is the right time to do it. And I made the switch. So
and here we are.
Here I am. Yeah.
Flying the 7576, got it all type rated, and who knows where the future will lead you.
That's right. Yeah. Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
I'm sure it's going to be good stuff.
It's exciting. I mean, I've been enjoying every minute of it. So it's wonderful. It's really not the destination. It's the journey. So it's phenomenal.
You made we kind of talked about this a little bit before we started recording today, and you made an interesting point. Or observation or part of your history where you were trying to be, look, Amar, I mean, listen to him. This guy is just a great guy, ethical, moral, etc. And he wants to do the right thing. And so the cush job that he had, he wanted to give his employer, plenty of time for them to find a replacement for him. Mm-hmm. And so you gave him like 3 months notice.
Yeah.
And that it wasn't until you got hired by this cargo outfit that you realized that 3 months was a very critical thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, as far as seniority goes, because in this business, seniority is everything.
Yeah, 15 numbers. I think they went and hired between the time when I had in my notice and I got on the line. So now I'm learning what seniority.
Yeah, so 15 numbers at my outfit is nothing.
Yeah.
You wouldn't even notice it,
right? But for an
outfit,
with 200 pilots, it's
much more significant.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So learn the lesson out there if you're working to be a professional airline pilot mm-hmm. or whatever. You should try to get on with that major company as quickly as you can, or whatever company that mm-hmm. has a seniority-based system, because it really does make a difference.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right. Well, good. Started listening to the Airline Pilot Guy show from pretty early on, right?
Yeah, 2011. I was a medevac pilot at the time. My daughter mm-hmm. wasn't born, so I think it was right from day one. I remember the Air France episode, and that sort of hooked me in. It was wonderful, and I went back and listened to Catholic Pilot, which I really love and I miss, and a lot of times feeling a bit nostalgic, I'll go back and listen to some of the earlier episodes. So
I don't. I go, oh gosh, wow.
Yeah,
really didn't have any idea what I was doing. Of course, it still sounds that way. So never mind.
No, it's a great show. It's wonderful watching it evolve, and here I am co-hosting. I didn't think that would ever happen. So
yeah, I mean, in hindsight, probably the worst thing that I did was actually make it into a show where I had other co-hosts. I mean, I think it really went downhill from that point. What wouldn't you say, Nick?
Scraping the barrel.
Okay. So anyway, great to have you, Amar, as part of our community.
Thank you.
And great to see you. Okay. Why don't we do a piece of audio feedback, and then after that might be a good time for this week's installment of Plain Tales. But before we do that, let's hear from Stefan.
Hello, Captain Jeff. Hello, APG team. Hello, everybody. Once again, a big thank you for your show. This is Stefan calling with greetings from Hamburg, Germany. You might recall that I'm flying the A380 on the left-hand seat. Right now, I'm listening to episode 301. You were talking about diversions and discussing the reason why pilots and airlines often choose to return to the departure airport when they cannot land at the scheduled intended point of landing or the scheduled destination. I can give you another reason. Perhaps up to half of the passengers come from there. They wanted to fly to B because they have a business meeting, and now they would arrive so late that for some of them, even for private travelers, it doesn't make sense anymore to go to the intended destination. So it's often sometimes helpful for them to return to the departure aerodrome. But actually, this is not the reason I give you this feedback. I'd like to give you a first-hand description of a diversion I recently had. In my career, I had 15 diversions, and most due to technical reason, some of them because of weather, but that was the first one because of a medical case on board. So it might be also interesting for Dr. Steph. It was during a flight from Europe to the States along the North Atlantic organized track system. So we were already over the open ocean. I was in my break. Folks might recall that long-haul flights often fly augmented. That means they have one or up to two additional crew members on board. In our case, we had one senior first officer, which come later on very handy for our trip. During this break, one passenger, an elderly man, complained about heart problems. We later found out that his own pacemaker shocked him twice shortly after takeoff. The cabin crew called for a doctor who was assisted with two nurses, one of them proficient even in intensive care. As the situation worsened, my colleague decided to wake me up for my break a bit earlier. When I entered the cockpit, they already arranged a telephone call between the doctor and a medical helpline my company has a contract with. On the other hand of this hotline, there are professional doctors who assist us as a crew and the medical trained helping passengers. They are also very familiar with the things we can do on board and we cannot do on board with the equipment we have. And also, which is very important, this team is very familiar with possible diversion airports. Well, not only about airports generally, which are suitable for our aircraft type, but more if the airports are suitable for the kind of disease or sickness our passenger have. An example, if you suspect a stroke, it is very handy to divert to an airport which has a stroke facility close by. In our case, they recommended a diversion, and together with the medical hotline, we decided that Keflavik is a very good airport. In addition to that, half hour later, we would have entered a predicted and active zone of turbulence, and you can imagine treating a sick passenger with everybody being buckled up doesn't work well. We announced our decision to divert to the medical helpline, and they informed our company. All this happened shortly before 30 West. we were in contact with Shenwick Control via CBDLC. We requested medical diversion to Keflavik, and it took a minute or two, and we got the answer. Clearance to Keflavik is not possible at flight level 380, suggesting contingency procedure, descent down to flight level 290, and then you may proceed direct to Keflavik. So now we have to go into details of the North Atlantic track system. The North Atlantic organized track system are a set of number from 4 up to, I believe, 7 tracks running parallel across the Atlantic Ocean from flight level 290 up to flight level 410. They're recalculated 2 times a day, optimized westbound during the day, and optimized eastbound at night. Always optimized against or with the actual wind. The separation between those tracks is a half or a full degree latitude, corresponding to 30 or 60 nautical miles in distance. If an aircraft has to leave the track system fast, it must apply the contingency procedure, which means it has to first fly parallel to the actual track by 15 miles, so in the middle between 2 tracks, before it can start descent below the altitude band of the track system. So in our case, we first flew the 50 miles, it was right of track, and then we started descent of flight level 290, informing everybody via the emergency frequencies and the air-to-air frequencies, and then proceeded direct to Keflavik Airport. We informed ATC about the initiation and completion of the procedure. Shenwick wanted to know the coordinates of the turning points toward Keflavik to recalculate our track to provide separation between other aircraft. During the whole procedure, I was still sitting behind my 2 colleagues on the observer seat to do all the organizing work, like informing the cabin crew, discussing details with the chief flight attendant or purser, and of course, informing all passengers. In addition, I supervised the recalculation of fuel and landing data for Keflavik before I started to take my seat up front left. We also started and informed Shenwick that we needed to dump fuel in order to be as close as possible to the maximum landing weight. The A380 has a very complex fuel system with 11 fuel tanks, which usually runs in automatic modes. That means usually the fuel is automatic distributed between the tanks to optimize for CG and wing loading. 4 of those tanks, the main tanks, can hold up to 80 tons of fuel. Those fuel in these tanks you cannot dump overboard. Well, to make a long story short, we ended up being 21 tons over the maximum landing weight. I know that sounds bad, but you should know that every aircraft is certified to land even at its maximum takeoff weight, just in case the crew decides to immediately return to an airport for a safe landing after takeoff. The only restriction is that the airplane is certified only to approximately half the normal descent rate upon touchdown compared to a normal landing. So 1 hour and 20 minutes later, we landed in Keflavik. I made a nice overhead landing within limits, and the ground control directed us to a big open ramp where we just parked and where there was enough room left for us to taxi out later on its own power. They provided stairs, and a medical team entered the aircraft to take care of the sick passenger. Right behind him, there were a custom and a police officer. In my opinion, it looked like that it was more important for them to get the customs declaration right and to make a copy of my passport than to get the data of the sick passenger. And now everybody had to be patient. We needed to refuel the aircraft, and that took quite a bit of time. We needed 2 trucks, and the pump system of those 2 trucks were not very fast. Altogether, we had a ground time of 2 hours and 20 minutes. So that took me ample of time to take care about several things. An example of loading luggage of the deboarding passenger, the elderly man and his wife. Get technical support regarding the overhead landing, and most important thing, to check with my crew about the upcoming duty time extension. Since we were an augmented crew, so we had the senior first officer on board, and the cabin crew had nice crew rest facilities and a planned minimum rest time of 90 minutes, they even had more, by the way, our flight was already scheduled with a maximum duty time of 17 hours. However, it was clear that we will exceed those 17 hours. We needed an extension. Prior to this decision, I have to check with my crew if they are fit for the extra duty. And since we had this long waiting time, I took the chance to personally check every crew member if he is fit for that extra duty. At the end, we continued our flight to our destination, and we did that with a duty time of 18 hours and 20 minutes. Think about that. During our flight, the third shift of the ground staff working back at home base had already started. Due to the extension of the duty time, we also needed to extend our rest time. That's the regulation. The station at our destination asked me if we could shorten the rest time, which I also can decide as a commander in order to meet the schedule of the next flight, the next day, or the return flight. But I refused. I said we needed to have the longer rest time. So the outbound flight back to Europe the next day was delayed due to our rest time restriction. But well, at the end, we still landed on time in Germany, since we flew a bit faster and we had favorable tailwinds. A diversion can be a very busy thing for the crew, cabin and cockpit as well. Since a lot of organization work has to be done, the cabin crew has to do several services, and in this case, I spare you with some details. But it was worth it, since later on I found out that the sick passenger was well. Well, the time I'm speaking this feedback, we still have 4 days to Christmas. I don't know when or even if you play this feedback, so just in case, I wish you and your team and everybody else happy holidays and a happy new year as well. And as we say in German, einen guten Rutsch ins neue Jahr. And just in case you do lay this, or this feedback will be played even in the distant future, I wish everybody a happy Easter as well. Once again, a big thank you for your show, and I'm happy to wait for the next episode. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Very funny, Stefan. Hey, Happy New Year. That works. We're not anywhere near Easter, so, but that was funny. Very nice, informative feedback to kind of indicate all of the things, the ramifications of, etc. And there were some really good comments in the chat room as well regarding this. I think Brian made a good point. He says, can you imagine this situation with an, quote, automated aircraft or autonomous aircraft? There's so many decisions being made that requires a human brain to do all the calculations and understand the ramifications of your actions, etc. And very informative. Thank you, Stefan.
Absolutely. It was good stuff.
Yeah. All right. Now, with that, why don't we do this week's installment of Plane Tales?
Ooh.
Yoo-hoo. Here we go. Where is it? Here it is.
The Old Pilot's Plane Tales. RAF Form 414. The Logbook. My first RAF logbook starts on the 24th of January 1975 with a flight in a chipmunk, incorrectly spelt with an O, like a member of a religious order devoted to chipped potatoes. It was Whiskey Papa 871, and with Squadron Leader Dummer, the boss of the RAF Church Fenton Primary Flying Grading School. It lasted 50 minutes, and we flew Grad X-1, performing 1 landing. So begins one of 3 books, which encompass 19 years of the most fun flying a chap could have. I thought I might occasionally dip into these books to see if any stories emerge that might be interesting to recall. A few months after that chipmunk flight, I'm up the road at RAF Linton on Ouse, the rather dubious name for the local river, and climbing into a Jet Provost Mark III to begin flying training in earnest. I note that it took me 2 flights, totaling 1 hour and 40 minutes, to get through the straight and level exercises before I was allowed to start turning, climbing, and descending. Trip 8 had me doing the dangerous and highly complicated 45-degree angle of bank turns. Wow, what a fun time my instructor, soon to gain the moniker Tricky Dicky, must have had. First jet solo came at trip 14 after 10 hours and 50 minutes and consisted of a 5-minute circuit. Not exactly stunning stuff, so I'm going to leaf forward a few pages before I send you all to sleep. I see a few repeated trips during basic instrument flying. Obviously, my grasp of IF wasn't as good as I remember. Plenty of radar recoveries and precision approach radar landings, and eventually I'm put before an instrument rating examiner to get my basic instrument flying grading. I guess it was a relief to pass that and get into some more exciting flying with my introduction to low level and lots of general handling, which would have involved spins, stalls, and aerobatics. We were all told to develop an aero sequence that tested our ability to stitch a series of aerobatic maneuvers together into a smoothly flowing demonstration of our skills. Sent off on our frequent solo trips, we would head off out over the Yorkshire Dales to practice. To see if we could keep our maneuvers properly aligned, we needed a feature under us that would show us if our noddy stall turn had kept straight or if we had flown a squint loop. Much favoured by the students was the beautiful tree-lined avenue leading up to Castle Howard. Long, gun barrel straight, and almost perfectly north-south, it was ideal, but more than once I was in some complicated outside turn into a 3/4 slow roll followed by a half cubanate blah, when the red and white flash of another stud's JP would cream past the canopy, because they had picked exactly the same spot to practice. Ah well, it was a big sky. Well into the course now, it was time for night flying. Usually we flew visually, navigating from well-learned landmarks, the city of York, the flat dales, the coast around Scarborough and Flamborough Head, avoiding the noise restriction over the Flamingo Park Zoo and keeping an eye out for the Great Northern Road with its line of RAS stations, Eldington, Church Fenton, Linton, Dishforth, Topcliffe and Leaming. At night, however, it all looked different. Huge black spaces interspersed with blobs of twinkling lights that made Huthwaite look just like Easingwold and Ampleforth resemble Nunnington. York looked just like a huge mass of illumination that stretched well beyond its usual limits, and on a clear night the vast glow from Leeds and Manchester looked so close we feared we had strayed off course. On our solo navigation exercises, no one ever wanted to be off first. We all liked to look ahead and see the comforting stream of anti-collision lights in front, confirming we were going the right way. Heaven only knows what would have happened if the first guy ever got lost. He probably would have played Pied Piper to the next 20 students, leading them a merry dance all over Yorkshire. There was a story that one foreign student was so nervous of flying his solo Navex, he spent the entire trip parked up in a remote corner of the airfield with his lights off, just making the required radio calls and never actually getting airborne. Then came our eagerly awaited land-away navigation trip. My instructor at that point was the lovely Mike Franks. In a previous incarnation, Mike had flown with the Royal Navy on board a carrier, Ark Royal, I think, flying the remarkable Fairy Gannet airborne early warning aircraft. In the 50s, the RN had used Douglas Sky Raiders in that role, but the Gannet was the British-built replacement. It was a damned ugly monster of a machine powered by an Armstrong Siddeley double Mamba turboprop. firing 2 contra-rotating bladed props around. Its wings could contort via a strange double folding mechanism to save space, and under the belly there was a pregnant bulge that housed the radar scanner. Mike had made a faux pas when taxiing off from the runway at Lossiemouth when he lifted his gear instead of his flaps, and unfortunately the undercarriage interlocks failed to prevent his ugly monster from settling down onto its radome whilst the props beat a tattoo on the concrete taxiway. We were allowed to choose which base we landed away at, but Mike kept dropping hints that a visit to his old Royal Naval Station at Yeovilton would be great fun. We flew low-level to Shawbury, refueled, and then transited to Yeovilton, where I was introduced to the delightfully confusing world of the Navy. Despite being on the land, the base behaved as if it was at sea. To leave the airfield was to do a run ashore, the toilets were the heads, and everyone seemed to be drinking horses' necks. I spent a very pleasant evening with the fish heads, being called a crab, before getting some sleep. The next day was free, and I had already worked out that if I rented a car, I could get from Yeovilton to Winchester fairly easily to see my girlfriend, who was at teacher training college there. All went well until I decided to stay the night and drive back early in the morning. When I woke, I realized that I had overslept by several hours. In a cold sweat, I thrashed back to the airfield and looked for Mike in the breakfast room. No sign of him. I blagged a lift to the flight line, and there he was, sitting, strapped into the jet, slowly drumming his fingers on the canopy rail. I sheepishly climbed in beside him, and once I got strapped in, he clicked on his microphone and said just one thing: "Take us home." Those were the only words he spoke for the whole trip. I carefully flew the high-level Navex back to Linton, and he climbed out without looking back whilst I tidied up the cockpit. The debrief consisted of one sentence: "Don't ever do that to me again." Lesson learned, I guess. I must have made an impression on the girl, however. She married me, and we're still going 40 years later. After 115 hours, I'd finished with the Jet Provis Mark III and moved on to the slightly more powerful and pressurized Mark V. I see sortie after sortie of formation flying, general handling, aerobatics, low-level navigation. We were down to 250 feet with an instructor and 500 feet when solo. With some 200 hours behind us, it was time to get our wings and move on to fast jet training at RAF Valley in Wales on the Folland Gnat. My first trip was with my new instructor, Flight Lieutenant Ray Pilley. Ray was an ex-Phantom pilot who came to RAF Valley through an interesting route. Previously based in Germany at RAF Bruggen on 31 Squadron, Ray was flying a recently modified aircraft which had changed the Phantom's wing folder system from one operated from the cockpit to one that was controlled by the engineers from the wheel well. On this aircraft, the wings had been spread, but, through an oversight, not locked. The cockpit warning lights had been disabled as part of the modification, so the only confirmation was a little orange pin that stuck up from the wing when unlocked. Unfortunately, this pin had been oversprayed by camouflage paint during a recent respray and was almost invisible. Ray did his walk around, but failed to notice the protruding spigots. As they tried to take to the air, the wings folded, and the aircraft pitched up nearly into the vertical. The Phantom danced on its reheats at about 100 feet for a short while, but was obviously going nowhere, so Ray ejected, only half a second ahead of his navigator, who had had the same idea. They were so close that Ray's seat rocket lightly toasted his navigator, and they landed not far from their aircraft, which itself came down only 100 feet from the nuclear QRA sheds housing 4 nuclear-armed F-4s. Trip 3 on the Nat was a practice diversion to Shawbury. It was the sortie that killed my fellow student Ash Smart, which I talked about on the Plaintail Death of a Pilot on APG 209. My logbook gives few clues about the trips I flew, just a list of exercise numbers until I come up to my final navigation test. I developed a bad habit of messing with the main gyro compass, and whereas I thought I was correctly synchronizing it, I was actually doing the reverse. As we all know, a 1 degree error in heading will displace you 1 nautical mile from track for every 60 nautical miles you fly. At 420 knots in the Nat, it didn't take long to do 60 miles, and I was quickly getting miles from my intended track. I was given a senior instructor to fly with, Rick Peacock Edwards, or RPE as we all called him. A hugely experienced pilot who flew Hunters, Lightnings, Phantoms, and then the Tornado, quickly worked out what I was doing, and after a few extra trips, he had me back on track in more ways than one. After the Nat, it was time to get over the runway to 3 Squadron, which flew Hunters. We converted to the Hunter at Valley to save time when we got to our tactical weapons unit, where all our flying would be on the venerable fighter. After 3 dual trips, I have proudly written Hunter F Mark 6 First Fighter Solo. That first Hunter Solo was a revelation. The side-by-side 2-seater was a completely different aircraft to the single-seater, and after doing my walk-around, I gazed at the closed canopy and wondered how the hell it was supposed to open. I didn't remember reading about any external controls for it, and I was stumped. Rather than displaying my ignorance, I said to the line mechanic who was seeing me off, "I say, old chap, would you mind opening the cockpit for me?" He gave me a look that spoke volumes, and obviously thought I was the laziest bloody student he had ever had the misfortune to meet. Reaching up with one finger, he rolled the canopy back on its rails until it was open, and then folded his arms. Blushing, I climbed in. There were no external controls on the single-seater because when unoccupied, the canopy was declutched from the electric motor and would roll back and forth quite freely. We were all briefed on how fast the single-seaters were, but nothing could prepare me for quite how quickly things were going to happen. With no tanks, weapons, or even gun ports on the Valley Mark 6s, they were probably the fastest Hunters around, and things happened quicker than I ever expected. Like most students, I expect, particularly in the unfamiliar layout of this new cockpit, I oversped both the gear and the flaps as I fumbled to find the controls in time. I had no idea what it would have been like to steer a bobsled down the Cresta run, but after that solo, I felt like I'd done just that. It took days to wipe the smile off my face. With that short course out of the way, it was time to head down to RAF Brawdy and to join Strike Command. We flew a combination of the Hunter Mark 6A, Mark 7, and Mark 9. It wasn't a long course, and we spent most of our time learning the academics of bombing, strafing, firing rockets, and air-to-air gunnery. We regularly flew in 4-ship tactical formations, but I see nothing remarkable except for a gunnery exercise, called off because a boat strayed into the target area, which was on the sands at Pembrey Range, and the day I scored 72% with snap rockets. Of note, our squadron boss was the irrepressible Hoof Proudfoot, an ex-Harrier pilot who wore the Air Force Cross for exceptional airmanship after safely landing a Harrier with a total electrics failure at night. He flew as an exchange pilot with the US Marines and later became an airline pilot. He became involved with the historic aircraft collection at the Imperial War Museum at Duxford and went on to fly a P-51 Mustang in Steven Spielberg's movie Empire of the Sun. Sadly, he died displaying a P-38 Lightning in 1996. Having thrown my body at the ground in the Hunter with great success, since I generally missed, it was now time to move on to the Phantom. I was starting to see a link between the instructors that I was being given. Were they all having their hands slapped? My next mentor was the lovely Roy Lawrence, whose claim to fame was to shoot down a Jaguar in Germany with a live Sidewinder. That story is in APG 234, Whoosh, Bang, Oops, but I'll leave my exploits in the Phantom and the rest of my career to a later date.
Another entertaining and informative Plain Tales by the old dot pilot. Thank you, Nick.
Excellent.
I'm so glad that reading out my logbook people find amusing. It's great, isn't it?
Yeah. You know what? I was looking at the picture that you included of your logbook, and you have the what do they call that? Dymo label?
Oh, yeah, that's right. Dymo tape. Yeah.
Yeah. I used to have one of those things. I don't know what happened to it.
Well,
they still make those things?
It was
not,
the most
not with that really thick stuff, right?
I haven't seen
it was the most modern thing going when I was had my logbook.
Yeah, you turn the wheel around and press really hard, and yeah.
That's it. Yeah, that was the fella.
Nick, did your logbook have a comment section?
Yeah, at the back we used to have to. We had a write up every an annual write up, and the comments were written there. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, yeah. No, I was just wondering if you put down some personal comments as well.
Oh no, I just appended a few just very cryptic remarks at the end of a trip. I never actually. I mean, some guys just glue in pictures and all that kind of stuff, but.
Right.
No, for me, it was an absolute chore doing my logbook. I used to hate it because my maths has never been particularly good. And after a few years flying, I got it thrown back at me by my flight commander, who had to oversign the monthly summaries, saying, "Look, Anderson, none of these bloody numbers add up." So he said, and what's more, looking back, they haven't added up for years. So I had to go through and sharp pencil all these trips to try and make all that, and it took me a week, and he kept saying, "Where's that bloody logbook?" And you know, even to the day I left the Air Force, the numbers never really all equaled. It was a bit of a shame, really. Thank God for computers. I do it on the phone now.
You probably kept a better diary with all the pictures that you took.
Yeah, I have got a pile of photo albums from my Air Force days. It's about 4 feet tall.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Thousands
Pictures that
in
I've
there.
seen. It's amazing.
That is
Well
fun.
done.
It's fun.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and I have nothing but memories in my head.
That's the way to do it.
Memories. In my head. Speaking of heads, head scratcher is what Ron writes. He says, "Hi, ABG crew. Here's what I've been scratching my head for, or head at, for years. My local airport, Teesside Airport. The main runway is runway 0523 and has been since the mid-70s, but I'm certain it used to be 0624, and I'm certain the runway hasn't moved. How can the coordination of the runway change? Can anyone of you guys explain this one? Thanks for the show, guys." That's from Not So Big Ron from North Yorkshire. Well, I think that you just didn't notice, Ron. They moved it 10 degrees, right?
Yeah, all the airfields are on a big turntable. Hasn't he spotted that?
I guess not. Maybe it just happened so slowly that
they
doesn't
go around every now and again.
But I think that Amar has the answer for this one.
Well, I mean, simply, I think it's just, Ron, as you know, the runways are aligned to magnetic north.
Magnetic north. So that's a key to this. What's happening here?
Right.
Oh no, I was going to say because I already noticed that Amar pulled up magnetic declination.
I was going to look at that, but you know what? I'm not even going to attempt to read it. So
yeah, so the magnet, the true North Pole, whatever is always, it doesn't change. It's like that's a point that is there forever. And the magnetic north is a mass of magnetized. I don't know, what is it called? What is that stuff that's underneath in the core of the Earth or near the? I don't know.
Is it the magma?
Magna? I don't know.
Magma?
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know. We have
anyway,
an iron core to the Earth, don't we?
It's the stuff that when you use a magnetic compass, it points to it.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is that that shifts over time.
Mm-hmm.
And as you just pulled up on the Wikipedia, that's called magnetic declination.
Yep.
And so over time, this changes. And then if you happen to be in a place in the world where North Pole and the magnetic north align perfectly from where you're standing, then everything is basically the same. True north and magnetic north is always going to be the same, and your runway is probably not going to change very much, or it's going to be a lot longer before the. Well, I guess we should back up a little bit. The reason why we name runway certain numbers is not just pulling it out of the hat. It's based on the heading, magnetic heading of the runway, and as the magnetic pole changes over time, so does the actual heading of the runways. And I believe it's so let's say let's use 050. Let's say that's our actual magnetic heading on the runway, and so that would be obviously runway 05. But as it moves over time to 051, 052, 054, and then I think finally is it the 055 where it will be carried over to the next 06 point. I'm not sure what the cutoff is, but it's either they round it to the next number. And so when this magnetic declination takes place and it hits a certain threshold, then it goes, okay, now we have to call this runway 06 instead of 05. I don't know if I did a very good job with that, but yeah.
Of course, the North and South Pole have swapped ends several times over millennia, and I believe we're actually due for a flip-flop before long. So that'll really confuse everything when all of a sudden all the northerly runways become south. I would have hoped by then we'll be doing everything in true north. Refers to the one that Jeff mentioned, the North Pole where the world spins around the axis of the world, whereas of course the magnetic pole just moves around at random and drifts across, and you can tell the difference between the two because the little dotted lines that go across a map called isogonals that tell you the variation. And of course Amar will be very familiar with that because there's usually a huge variation in the northern climes of Canada, and in fact there are a lot of airfields up there, Amar, where they don't even use magnetic headings at all even on the VORs. Isn't that right? Everything's orientated to true north.
Yeah, that's precisely right.
Yeah, I know that long range navigation systems, once you get above a certain latitude, then it's just all aligned to true.
Yeah, I used to love it on a map when you used to pass the line which was the beginning of compass unreliable, and then you keep going north, and then it would eventually say, you're now in an area compass useless. Oh, that was great.
It's so unreliable, it's completely useless. Don't even get the darn compass out. Forget it.
Nope.
Yeah, but it's interesting because it's not always based on latitude. I mean, we used to fly to Frobisher Bay, Iqaluit quite a bit, and Iqaluit is still in magnetic, and Rankin Inlet is quite a ways south of Iqaluit, and that's in true as well. So,
well, the magnetic pole's somewhere in Greenland, isn't it? So it's not even in Canada anymore.
No,
I don't know where it's heading. I'm not kind of sure. Perhaps it's heading.
How fast is it heading? I mean, how fast does that darn thing travel?
Well, it actually, it gives you on the bottom of a decent map, it'll tell you how fast the variation is moving. So, because obviously you might get a map that was drawn in 1975, and you're now looking at it in 2018, and you'll want to know if the isogonals have changed. And it will actually there say at the bottom what the variation changes per year. So you can go, okay, it's 1.5 degrees east or west per year, so I can then calculate the time between now and when the map was drawn, and how much the variation is, and how much extra I have to take on or take off or add on.
Very, very good. So I hope that not so big Ron got his answer.
There's just
that.
ways to confuse us, Ron, because even when you get the weather, I mean, there's times where it's in true and times it's magnetic. So, and in some areas, it can make quite a difference, especially with higher winds and crosswinds. So, yeah, I agree with you, Captain Nick. I wish we can all agree to one unit and whatever that is, and it'll just make life so much easier.
Yeah, but there'd be all those damned Americans who want to use compasses.
Whiskey compass.
We like our whiskey compasses. We like the whiskey too.
It's all about the whiskey.
Yeah, it is.
Hello, APG crew. This is David, longtime listener, first time giving feedback. I was just listening to episode 303 where the discussion was around single engine taxis and turboprops. I used to work for a regional carrier in the United States. Don't want to give you the name, but the initials are ASA. We used to operate a fleet of ATR 72s, similar to the Dash 8, and we would always taxi single engine if we were taxiing single engine with the right engine. The reason for that is the ATR 72 had a feature called hotel mode, and we did not have an APU on that aircraft, so we would use hotel mode when we did not have ground power or air conditioning available to be able to provide electricity and pneumatics for the aircraft while we didn't have that ground equipment. I don't know if it's the same way on the Dash 8, but that could explain why they taxi in on the right-hand engine. Thanks for all of the hard work. Absolutely love the show. Congratulations on episode 300. And I look forward to many, many great episodes in the future.
Thank you, David.
Did he say he was looking forward to mini episodes? Do we need to cut it
Mini
down
episodes? Oh, is another one of those people that wants us to be to do a shorter show, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
No, I think he said many. And by the way, Ms. Piper is a fan of your voice, David. She says, great voice. Yeah, you do have a nice voice, and I'm just still trying to figure out what airline with the letters A, S, A. I don't know. That's a tough one. Hotel mode for me. That's when I'm in the van heading to the hotel. Never had one of those modes inside the airplane, but interesting. All right. Well, thank you very much for that. Moving on. Let's see. Robert Thompson sent us this image from one of his social media feeds, and he is showing us taking a picture of this Allegiant Airlines MD 80 something Mad Dog MD 80 series outside the window, and his comment here is gate agent. The captain has been in contact with me and has informed me of the arrival time. And he says, really? So unless Allegiant has some kind of a special device where the captain can speak directly with the gate agent, I don't really think that that's accurate. Gate agents say a lot of things that aren't really technically correct. The one that always gets me is when I'm in the gatehouse and I'm hearing the gate agent say, today's flying time is 2 hours and 30 minutes. And I'm thinking, no, that's the block time, scheduled time out to scheduled time in. That's not the flying time, so I always have to kind of emphasize when people are on the airplane that the actual flying time today is blah, 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 and we're going to be there early or whatever. But I don't know. One of my many pet peeves, I guess. Thank you, Robert, for sending that in. Very amusing. We do actually send in reports at Acme Airlines. We have our ACARS system, our box that is kind of a digital communications device where we can hit a certain cue that says in range. And the in range report, we can kind of update our estimated time of arrival, and we can indicate how many wheelchairs we're going to have and need for our passengers, any unaccompanied minors, and other comments that we want to make to the arrival station. So perhaps that's what she meant, that the captain was in communication with her in a roundabout way, I guess, or
she was probably using Flight Radar 24.
That could be. That would probably be the most
accurate. More accurate than
I do see, actually, gate agents' computer screens at times, and I do see Flight Radar 24 or Flight Aware or one of those sites where they actually look and see what the real time is going to be when they come in.
Yeah, a lot of the fixed-based operators, that's all they use. They
Yeah.
use Flight Aware or Flight Radar 24, and
yeah, it's a good system.
Yeah,
works great. Larry sent me this. He says, "Remember these 43 words, Jeff?" And here we go. Throttles, idle, rudder and ailerons, neutral, stick, abruptly full aft and hold, rudder, abruptly apply full rudder, opposite spin direction, opposite turn needle, and hold, stick, abruptly full forward, one turn after applying rudder, controls, neutral after spinning stops, and recover from dive. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the spin recovery maneuver and boldface for the T-37, the Cessna T-37 jet trainer in the USAF, or, well, it used to be. They're all retired now, as are most of the airplanes that I've flown in my life. But,
I'm trying to remember which aircraft it was, either the Gnat or the Hunter. We used to have kick the ball, punch the needle. So you'd kick the slip ball with the appropriate rudder. You would require to kick it, and then you'd slam the controls forward with the aileron in the direction of the needle. So yeah,
very similar. In actuality, I've never tried it, but I always suspected that if I just let go of all the controls, the airplane would probably recover on its own. But
well, that was the recovery on the Hawk that I trained on. Yeah, we used to teach a proper, opposite rudder and stick forward, blah blah recovery. But in reality, if you just let go, it would sort itself out. Very strong directional stability on the Hawk.
That's nice. Nice to have. Let's see. Brian sent us some feedback with a link to an article in avweb.com. He said, Jeff, perhaps you will consider this a worthy article for sharing. Indeed, many of us are starting to believe it's possible again. It might even become financially rewarding again. I earned my private, and he's talking about this article, which is demand increases appeal of airline jobs. So going back to Brian's feedback, he says, I might even become financially, I earned my private pilot certificate in June of 2011 and began eagerly working. Let me try that again. And began eagerly working toward 250 hours. However, soon after that, I learned that first year FOs were only earning a bit over $20,000 per year. Additionally, the time requirement soon changed. Needless to say, these together took the wind out of my sails. Therefore, I opted to stay in my position as an adjunct part-time college professor, not good pay either, because I was not able to justify the continued flight training cost versus the expected salary. Anyway, it looks like things are looking up now. And then he said, link below. And we'll put this link in the show notes, but it's an article about the fact that, things are looking up for this career. And the starting salaries are higher than they've been in quite some time for most of the regional airlines. Are finally figuring out that, you can't pay wages that qualify you for food stamps and have people, seriously compete for these kind of jobs. And they're going to do something else. Even if they have a passion, a love for aviation, they're just going to say, I can't raise a family with this kind of wage and benefits. And but things are changing, and hopefully it's not changing too late. But we'll put that link in the show notes for you all to read. Moving on, I'm going to skip around a little bit. How are we doing on time? We're getting about the 2:43. We're getting close to the end. Getting close to the end, Doctor. And let's see. Let me move back to this. I thought Stephen is a big part of our APG community. Stephen, a while back, was a flight attendant for a regional airline, and then got a job in the power production industry in Georgia. And then he took a leap of faith and got on with a survey. And, you mentioned, Amar, that was one of the jobs that you did to help build your time. Well, Stephen now is working for a survey company as well. He sent us some feedback just to kind of get us up to date with what's going on with him and what it's like to be a survey pilot.
Hey, APG crew, Stephen Ivy, the survey pilot from West Georgia. Gonna leave some pretty long feedback. I haven't left any in a while and have a good bit to say. So I've been doing survey work now for about 3 months. I started back at the end of October for Acme Survey out of Indiana, and it's been a very interesting experience. I spent the first month not flying a whole lot because apparently you can't take pictures when there's leaves on the trees for whatever reason. But let me just explain to you what exactly I'm doing. Because when you say aerial survey, most people think you fly around and use your personal camera to take pictures. And well, I do that. That's not the job. So I fly a Cessna 172 that has the back seats removed and has a computer and 5 camera system installed. So I've got 5 cameras, 1 pointed out each side of the airplane and 3 pointed down at different angles. So basically, we get directed on where to go to take pictures, and we load them up on the computer. And then we have a little indication bar that's on top of the panel that tells you where to go and how far off the line and whatnot you are. So when I say the line, that's the line of which we're taking pictures. So just picture an imaginary line, and for you pilots, just picture a localizer course. So you fly along this line, and then the computer, every time it's a GPS coordinate that's supposed to, it'll take a picture. So this line, though, you have to be at a certain altitude, plus or minus 200 feet. And then you have a lateral tolerance, so left or right tolerance of 150 feet, which can get away from you really quick in a windy day, or if you aren't paying attention and thinking about other things. And then you also have a max pitch angle of 6 degrees, a max roll angle of 5 degrees, and then you could have a max crab angle limit of 20 degrees. So conventional flying, you're taught you don't cross control ever because it's a bad thing and can cause you to lose a lot of altitude, and some other bad things will happen. Well, I'm here to tell you that that is all I fly now is cross control. So when I say cross control, picture the yoke in your hands and you're turning it to the left, and you're supposed to apply the same rudder to line up the ball on your coordinator. So I'm doing the exact opposite. I will turn to the left and apply right rudder pressure to keep the plane from crabbing too much one way or another, and also to keep from having too much of a roll effect, which, there's a certain tolerance to that as well. So that's basically what I do. And then also just a fun little tip that I've learned to do while we're doing this. So when the wind's really bad on the line, your crab angle gets out of whack. There was a guy that I was flying with for a little while. He was telling me, so if you, instead of cross controlling, you actually pitch into your turn, but give it opposite rudder. So you're actually holding a 3-degree pitch, and then the rudder's sliding you out, which basically means the plane's flying in a diagonal sideways. So your picture, if you're going down a straight line, hold your hand out, turn it to the left slightly, and then bring it up a little bit. And that's basically how I'm flying. So, learned a lot of little bit of things you just don't want to do as an actual commercial pilot, but kind of have to learn how to do them for this job. So other than that, the job's been pretty okay. I enjoy it. It gets boring going back and forth all day for 4 hours, but I've learned to pass the time. Me and the other guys working in the areas will talk on air to air a pretty good bit, cut up jokes and spot traffic for each other and everything. And then as far as maintenance, You know, when I was getting into this line of work, there was a lot of talk about how these companies don't maintain their airplanes, they skip out on maintenance, and a lot of other stuff. That is all true. So my partner that I was working with a couple of weeks ago, we were in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and we were going up to start the day. I had already taken off, and I was climbing out, and then he took off behind me, and he had checked in with approach, and then he said he had to go back, and he was texting us back when he got on the ground, and his oil cooler line had come off and had leaked out oil out of the engine and everything, and he was able to fly back to the airport. Let's see. There was another guy I worked with. He was just getting ready to go out, and he was adjusting his mixture, and he was turning it. You know, on 172s, there's a little turn knob that lets the mixture control out. And while he was doing that, the whole rod that kind of pulls on the cable came out of the panel. There was another guy that I worked with that his brakes failed, and luckily he was going slow at the time and just ran off the taxiway. Let's see. I think that covers all of the major issues that have happened. Luckily, my airplane hasn't had anything major happen, which I just gave up my airplane. I'm actually home right now, so I'm going to be getting a different airplane when I go back out. But yeah, so aerial survey, definitely an adventure. Goods and bads. I mean, I can't really complain too much. I've gotten a little over 150 hours in the past month, and that's a lot more than I would have gotten at home paying for my flight training out of pocket. Or not flight training, but fielding time out of pocket. So definitely some good experience from all this, especially dealing with air traffic control and busy airspace. I've found that most controllers don't really like it when you tell them that you're going to be going back and forth over the top of the busy airport taking pictures. But, you know, some of them are a little bit easier to work with than others. But anyway, and like I said, I'm home for a week. They give us a week off about every 2 to 3 months. So I'm going to be catching up on life at home. Currently, I'm going to be doing some multi-engine time building while I'm home to meet my ATP requirements. And then I am going to be flying the Mooney around a little bit as well. Actually working on partnering that airplane out. Had a couple of people that are interested, and a couple of them are actually APG listeners. So apparently this show is good for aircraft sales. So, but anyway, hope everybody is doing well and enjoyed the holidays, and we will talk to y'all later.
Stephen, you owe me like what, 10-20% or so for helping you sell the airplane, right?
20%. That's
20%. Is that standard?
No, that's steep. I think 10%.
Too steep. Well, you know, Stephen is a friend of ours. So I'll tell you what. How about just 5%? That will be okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
No, of course we're just kidding. Great to hear from you, Stephen. And I'm glad you left us that feedback, because we have been wondering how this job has been working out for you. But 150 hours in a month, that's a lot of flying. And you'll remember that Amar talked about that. You know, he was a survey pilot for a time in his journey, and he said, "Yeah, I think it kind of gets boring sitting in the airplane just running back and forth in the lines." But hey, you're in that time, and that's why you're doing it, right?
Yeah, we used to call it mowing the desert in the Middle East.
Mowing the
Back
desert.
and forth.
Yeah, that's funny. Well, anyway, Stephen, I hope that you enjoy or have enjoyed. I forgot exactly when he sent this, but I hope that you're enjoying your time off. And before you head back and start flying, mowing the desert or whatever. But always good to hear from you. And let's get together sometime. Let's do another meetup here in Atlanta. Okay. We have some feedback from a bin liner pilot. Oh, we knew that Captain Nick would enjoy this. This
is that official now?
Yeah.
It's called the bin liner.
Oh, that's what. Apparently, that's what it's called here.
Okay.
On this show.
Pip flies a lemon.
Yeah.
I don't know how Nick has this power to rename everything. A lot of people in the world, in the aviation world, call it a Dreamliner.
Yeah.
I think that's what Boeing prefers.
Nah.
Anyway, this Captain Richard, he calls himself Captain Richard Binliner, so he's even calling himself that. So I guess it's official.
Good man. We like him.
Yeah. He says, "Hello, APG crew. Captain Richard here from Acme, Canada. On episode 304, you were discussing the Delta flight into Atlanta and that the tower visibility was 1/8 of a mile, but the RVRs were 5,000 to 6,000 feet. I would like to know what category of approach ATC was using. If they were only set up for Cat 1 approaches, then at least at my airline, I couldn't fly to Cat 2 or Cat 3 limits or do an autoland unless the airport was set up for Category 2 or Cat 3, which involves setting up the sensitive areas around the runways to protect localizer and glide slope integrity and an increase in aircraft spacing on the approach. Is it possible Atlanta was not set up for Cat 2 or Cat 3 approaches, and the crew was not prepared for a Cat 2 or 3 approach and autoland, but rather expected Category 1 limits and weather? Was your favorite controller faking them out?" That could be. I don't know. And I was thinking to myself, what are those in the U.S., the weather requirements? I had to go through and look at my aeronautical information manual, and I got this from that. All pilots should be aware that disturbances to ILS localizer and glide slope courses may occur when surface vehicles or aircraft are operated near the localizer or glide slope antennas. Most ILS installations are subject to signal interference by either surface vehicles, aircraft, or both. ILS critical areas are established near each localizer and glide slope antenna. And then when these added protections go into effect are automatically when weather conditions are less than 800 feet and or visibility 2 miles. And so it goes into a little bit more detail about that. But anytime the weather is 800 or less than 800 feet and visibility less than 2 miles, these critical areas should be protected. So in this case, it would be well below 2, even at 5,000, 6,000 RVRs. The critical areas would be protected based on those numbers. And so at that point, it doesn't matter whether you're doing Cat 1, Cat 2, or Cat 3, as far as I'm aware. Captain Nick, I was wondering what Acme Red uses for relief pilots on the longer flights, be it the 330.
We just get some of the passengers to pop in.
Do you give them any kind of like a test or anything just to make sure that they can handle it, or?
No, not really. Sometimes if they won't come in, we tie a bit of string to the stick and just lead it back into the cabin and give it to them to hold.
Oh, okay. He says at Acme, Canada, we have a dedicated relief pilot for our 3 pilot operations and an extra first officer and a relief pilot on our 4 pilot ops. The relief pilots, although trained for it in the sim, are not endorsed to take off or land in line operations unless, of course, we all have the fish.
Yeah,
what? So, oh, that's weird, because I think at Acme, whether you're a relief pilot or not, you're fully qualified to do everything.
Yeah, we had a few of these guys. We used to call them cruise pilots. They had one stripe, and it was kind of a trial. They joined the company knowing what the deal was, but basically they only allowed to fly in the cruise. Once the descent started, they had to be out of the seat, and the regular crews had to take over. Pretty dismal job, I think, really, because all you're doing is sitting there for hour upon hour monitoring and working the radio. You're not allowed to really handle the aircraft much, and certainly no hand flying available really in the cruise. Once you're an RVSM, you're obliged to use the autopilot. But eventually the company worked them up to being first officers, and then some of them are captains now. So, it worked for them, but that was just a trial with, I think it was a dozen of them or something. But no, we just use a regular first officer as a relief pilot. We don't have enough captains and to use a second captain if we have 4 pilots. So we have an extra 2 first officers and the operating crew of a first officer and a captain. If we're on a 4 pilot op, So I know some airlines always insist on having 2 captains on board if they're on a 4-pilot trip, but that's not our requirement. And most of our flights, quite honestly, I don't think there are any that actually require 4 pilots. I can't think of any.
So these cruise pilots, obviously they were pilots, so they know how to land an airplane.
Well, they were, yes, they had either I guess they had an frozen ATPL probably. So, but not the hours, and we didn't recruit them with the idea of doing anything other than sitting in the cruise, and they weren't allowed to sit out there an operating seat during the takeoff and landing.
But of course, they must have some kind of pilot licenses to get to that position.
I think, frozen a transport pilot's license.
Yeah.
So they were just waiting for the hours.
I think at Acme Canada, the RP position, the relief pilot position, is it's normally a junior pilot position. Depending if it's available at the time of hire. A lot of guys that's what they want. They want to get on the fly the big 777s or the 787s and do some of the international stuff. And so you can either be a first officer on the 320 or the Embraer at Acme Canada, or get onto the bigger heavies, the 787, the 777s. So I would say on average, a lot of them definitely they'll have an ATPL. I don't know if anybody at Acme Canada was hired without an airline transport pilot license in the last at least 10 years, and a couple thousand hours as well. My assumption and my guess is they probably have a full type rating course or something close to it, but they don't do any line training to land the airplane. But I would imagine they're highly qualified pilots.
Yeah, same. When they did lots of simulator work, and when they're in the simulator, they're expected to be able to land the simulator. So that was a requirement, just in case they had to operate in the seat because someone was sick. And even perform the landing. They had to be capable of doing that, but they just didn't do it for real.
Right. But at least you'd be, assured that if something terrible went wrong and they were having to be at the controls for landing, that they were perfectly capable. So.
Well, I don't think there'll ever be a scenario where you'll have 2 RP pilots at the controls. So you'll always have at least a first officer, a line first officer, and maybe accompanied with a relief pilot. So, and I'm guessing that the first officer will occupy the captain seat and the RP will stay in the right-hand seat, but I'm not sure. It's just a guess.
Yeah, I think we'd do it the other way around. The first officer.
The other way around. That would make sense. It just makes sense. So,
there was something else I was going to say. It's gone. Doesn't matter.
Okay. He said, as a side note, the 787 has 4 235 VAC variable frequency starter generators, 2 per engine, and the VU has 2 of these VAC variable frequency starter generators. Thus, we routinely start both engines at the same time using the 2 APU starter generators, which saves us fuel from the shorter start and taxi times. Wow, that's kind of cool. They start both engines simultaneously.
Yeah, we can do that on the 340.
Oh,
we can start 2 together, and we're using the APU. But for some reason on the 330 we can't. The APU hasn't got enough puff to wind 2 simultaneously, which I thought was a bit pathetic. I've remembered the thing I was talking about. Amar, so you've got guys that would purposely, as a junior first officer, go on with the heavy jets, despite the fact that they're going to miss out on all the handling experience on the shorter range jets and all that advantage of getting the sort of all those sectors under their belt, and then move on inevitably to the longer haul flights. They would prefer to go straight into the cruise pilot job on one of those big jets.
Well, again, it's just a guess, but I do know, whatever's available at the time. If an RP position is available, or the 320 FO, or whatever the demand is, I don't know if it's seniority based. You pick a number out of a hat depending on how many guys are in the class or gals, and I think some I know of some people that's what they want. They want to be, a relief pilot on, some of these bigger flights.
I don't know what you think. I find that a little short-sighted. I'd rather,
Y-
get
yeah.
my time in flying lots of sectors until I become a damn good pilot. Then I can go waste my time going halfway around the world, one landing a month
Like
or
what
whatever.
you're doing now.
Well, now,
Exactly.
yeah, that's true. But mind you, a lot of these guys, I mean, Canada's a pretty small country, relatively speaking, in terms of population. So a lot of these guys, been doing that on the RJs and the Dash 8s. And, so that they've all, on average, I would say, that have, over 5,000 hours of flying before they would go on to a company like AC.
Yeah, good point.
Or Acme Canada.
It's not like they're hired off the street.
Right. Yeah.
Huh, interesting. Well, thank you very much for your perspective as a binliner pilot for Acme Canada, Captain Richard. Appreciate the feedback, and thanks for keeping us straight. And I'm getting hungry, and Amar is looking at his watch because he's thinking, I'm going to be in the sim here pretty soon, and I better start studying. It's his check ride today, so wish Amar luck, although he doesn't need any. He's a very proficient pilot, I'm sure, although I've never flown with him.
Find the autopilot engage button.
That's all you need to do.
That's all you need to do. And if it clicks on, you click it on multiple times.
Just keep pushing, just mashing that button
engages,
over and over until it works.
That's the trick.
And and we had a couple more pieces of feedback in the folder. We're going to shift those to the next episode. We have somebody talking about the honor guard and transporting human remains of our fallen soldiers. And so I want to spend a little more time on that one than we have left on today's show. And also Derek sent us some audio feedback about, do you know who you're flying with? And that's going to be a good discussion as well. So we're going to push those on to the next episode.
In the case of Jet Airways, they probably knew.
Yeah, they knew each other too well, I think.
Well. Yeah, that's the
so
issue.
307 will be next week. I'm hoping to be able to record something sometime, hopefully earlier in the week next week, because I am planning, as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, to fly over to London to catch the 200th episode recording and celebration of the PT UK. And let's see, and again, Captain Nick, you're speaking at the Royal Aeronautical Society in just south of Manchester, right?
That's right, at the RF Museum Cosford, at the what is actually the Cold War exhibition, and that is on the evening of Thursday the 18th.
At probably 7 o'clock, something like that.
Yeah, I think it's 7:30, but probably 7ish.
Okay.
Yeah,
if
you look up the Royal Aeronautical Society website, it's all there.
Awesome. All right. And if you want to learn more about the show, always head over to the airlinepilotguide.com website, and all kinds of information there about so many different things about the crew and community. And not going to go into everything. You just have to check it out yourself. And let's see, we have the apps for the mobile devices, your iPhone or Android phones. You can get the Airline Pilot Guy Show app for free, and there's no ads or anything like that. It's a great way to get push notifications when they're working. I did send one out for today's show, but I'm not sure how many people got it. I didn't get one, but I knew that we were doing the show, so it doesn't matter. Social media, Captain Nick, you want to tell us about social media?
No, I think Amar should do that.
Okay.
Okay, social media.
He was falling asleep.
Oh,
no, I'm only kidding. We are on the website at Airline
podcast today. Is that what we're doing?
Yeah.
AirlinePilotGuide.com.
Yeah.
On the website, our Twitter handle is at APG Crew, and you can find us on Facebook. Look for Airline Pilot Guy.
Yep, and we're also on Slack, and Hillel is the one that manages that. So here, take it away, Hillel.
APG listeners, please join us on our Slack team. On Slack, we share news and ideas. We suggest episode and Plain Tales topics. We plan meetups and events. To get into the Slack team, please send me a tweet with your preferred email address to @HI11E1, and I'll send you an invitation. That's Hillel @HI11E1, and see you in Slack.
Thank you, Hillel. And by the way, Hillel is @HI11E1. So if you send it to whoever has at Hillel with the L's, you're probably not going to get on the APG Slack team. So just a little tip there. And let's see what else. That's about it. So until next time, wishing you clear skies, unlimited visibility, and tailwinds. Take care and God bless.
Bye, everybody.
Beautiful.
Woohoo.
That is it. All right. We're
Excellent.
going to shut down and pack things up and get so I can get out of Amar's hair, because I know that he's probably getting nervous about his
whatever's left of it.
Great to have you on the show, Amar. It was a pleasure chatting to you.
Thank you very much. I look forward to meeting you in the future.
I'm sure we'll get together at some point.
Yeah, it'll be a major disappointment.
Yeah.
Life's like that.
Just kidding. Nick's a great guy, and so is everybody else in the community. And let's see, I just turned off the recorder.
No,
I hope that it's recorded.
We love Nick in Canada.
Do you?
Well, my brother's Canadian, so you have to.
Where is he?
He lives in Vancouver.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place.
Are you planning?
He's a naturalized Canadian now. He's been bloody living there so long. And what really annoys me is he still gets a British pension, old age pension.
What?
Now, what is that about? He hasn't
Wow.
lived it since he was like 20 something, and he's receiving and then he rubs his face in and saying, "Oh, you wouldn't believe how much money I got this month from your taxpayers," and I'm of course still a taxpayer. So I'm getting.
Yeah, he probably just knows that he's going to get a good reaction from you.
Oh, he does it just to wind me up. Yep.
All right, folks. Thanks for hanging with us today. And again, look for something earlier in the week next week so that I can publish something.
I better try and get a plain tail done.
Yes, you should.
Yeah, I've been so busy getting my what
if you don't have time to do a plain tail, that's all right. We don't have to have one though.
Oh God, it would be the first time I'd ever missed.
Really? Okay.
Yes,
well,
it would.
Yeah, you got a bunch of them out there. And yes, Liz, I am working on it, although I had a major setback with the website crashing, server crashing. So honestly, I haven't worked very much on it lately, but I hope to have the Plain Tales page and feed up and running sometime.
Yeah, that's going to be awesome. Yeah, that'll be great.
All right. With that, I'm going to shut down the broadcast and wish you all adieu. Is that right? I don't know.
Bye, Nick. It was great.
Yes.
See you, everybody.